going to call the meeting to order. Gwen, can you please have a roll call vote, or excuse me, attendance?
Yes, ma'am. Director Baker? Director Case?
Here.
Director Diaz? Director Foley?
Here.
Director Hamilton?
Present.
Director Mendieta Ramos?
Here.
Director Mays? Director Olson?
Here.
Director Wilson?
Here.
Thank you. Are we in compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes, Madam Chair, we are in compliance.
Good. And it is good to see people in person, faces and all of that stuff. I think this is, well, we did a little attempt in December, but it didn't stay. So this is officially, we're back and I think sitting in this chair. So it's good to see everybody here. So we do have, I think, one person, comments from the public. And so it's Kevin Mulvaney from Local 212.
Sir, doing great.
Board Chairperson Olson, members of the MATC Board, and Dr. Martin. I am Kevin Mulvaney, Executive Vice President of AFT Local 212, who always thanks you for your service to our beloved college. I bring greetings from Local 212 President Dr. Conley, who regrets her absence but is attending to a family matter. I too am just taking a moment to look at people's faces, and finally being together, it puts things in perspective. Further providing perspective is the fact that many members of the MATC community claim Ukrainian descent and are active members of the Milwaukee Ukrainian community. Members of Local 212 have rallied and marched with them and will continue to do so because we are grief-stricken, outraged, and mortified regarding the international events unfolding before our eyes. Through social media and personal communications, we learn of the atrocities in Ukraine, killing and injuring family members and friends of our cherished colleagues. Local 212 expresses its deepest sympathy to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, and I know you do as well. Thankfully, our work here at MATC goes on. That's my appearance here today. Yesterday, you should have received a communication from Local 212 containing our comprehensive compensation resolution, which is the result of extensive meetings among the employee groups we represent. We know the document is long, but ask that you give it the close attention it deserves. As is my custom, I had prepared a lengthy and typically snarky diatribe that I won't bore you with because I know how long these meetings go. I want to keep things in perspective. I know that each of you is more than capable of reading and understanding our resolution for yourself. And finally, I know that Dr. Conley and Dr. Martin spoke just hours ago, and she has assured us that matters will be addressed in a collaborative manner. Nevertheless, I come before you so that the faculty, paraprofessionals, and MPBS staff whom we represent are assured of our commitment to actively address these all-important issues of compensation and collaboration. They are the ones who created and vetted the resolution before you, and they remain hopeful that this board will fulfill its duty to govern the college, making sure the administration works with us to immediately address the myriad of issues we have brought forth. As always, I thank you for your time. Good luck.
Thank you. And that concludes our public comments for tonight. We do have several minutes to approve tonight. There are 4 sets of them. The regular board meeting on January 25th, the special board meeting on February 8th, the special board meeting on March 1st, and the board retreat on March 4th. So can I have a motion for approval of those 4 sets of minutes?
I move approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Oh, a second.
Thank you. Any discussion or corrections noted? So we have a motion by Director Foley and a second by Director Hamilton to approve the 4 sets of minutes as presented. Can I have a voice vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will then move on to the approval of consent agenda items. We have several items in the consent agenda. Can I have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda. I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any items that anyone would like to have a discussion or have a question on? Hearing none, we have a motion by Director Foley and a second by Director Hamilton to approve the consent agenda items as presented tonight. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now going to move on to our board action items, which is our first one we always have is our resolution. Mr. John Meehan is here in person. So before I ask him to get started, can I have a motion for resolution F0220-03-22 authorizing the sale of $1.5 million general obligation promissory notes series 2021-2022 of the Milwaukee Area Technical College District?
I move approval.
Second, thank you. Mr. Meehan.
Good evening. Thank you. It's my pleasure and privilege to be before you again. I'm glad they adjusted the screen because a couple minutes ago I was looking at that and there's this big shiny spot right back here, which I didn't know existed till this moment. So I'm glad. Thank you, whoever changed that. We'd like to talk about today's bid opening. It's a wild time in the market. It's pretty crazy. For example, today the rates for like 1 to 10 years went up 12 basis points. It's a pretty good jump. The 10-year treasury is basically flat from 1 through 10 years. Things are leveling out. Saying all that, we still got 3 bidders, which is always good. Collier Securities is a winning bidder at a 1.99 true interest cost, and I like to give you as a reference point. This time I don't like to, but I will. Last month it was 1.39. The Huntington came in at a cover of 205 and Fidelity the third. All 3 of those firms bid on the last. We've seen them show up on issues, so this isn't any outlier as far as firms showing up. These are good bids, but at a 1.99, that's certainly higher than we've seen in the past. Next page, please. The issue itself is one of the $1.5 million issues. The date settlement is April 14th. And the maturities are June 1, 23 through 26, which match your existing principal payments. You have an interest payment on December 1. You do have funds available for that payment. They're non-callable, and the AA1 is confirmed. The language in the back of the report of the handout is the exact same language as it was the last report. They have nothing new today to add from the last sale. So it's the same language. As I mentioned, Collier's is a winning bidder. If you go to the next page and you show the overall financing plan, and this is something I know the board has seen many times. One thing I would mention is all these years I've been using it's really small type, so I apologize. Hopefully you can see it in your sheet. We use an average rate of 4%, and it was 4% for all the just doing the math to run the analysis. And if you go back to the first sale of last fiscal, of the fiscal year we're in, when it sold in June and sold in July, the average rate was a 193. Today, the average rate is a 366. So that 4%, you're being way too conservative? Maybe not. I mean, rates have gone up. We're still within budget. We're still within the financing plan. And this will all be altered as we go into the 22-23 financing plan. Saying that, you would still have to say, but it's good money. It's still tax exempt money. It's an average rate of 366. The true interest cost came in just under 2%. We got good bids, which is always good news, and we'll continue to access the market without any trouble. What I've just covered has been put into the resolution prepared by your bond counsel for your consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So overall, good news.
Oh, good news. Right.
Right now, yep. We're all holding our breath, right?
Right.
Month by month, we'll see. Okay, if there are no questions, then there is a motion by Director Foley and a second by Director Mendiego Ramos we need a roll call vote for this one, please.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Foley,
Aye.
Director Hamilton,
Unmute. Aye.
Director Mediator Ramos. Aye. Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Baker, and Director Olson.
Aye. Next is resolution F0221-03-22, which authorizes the issuance of $1.5 million general obligation promissory note series 2021-2022K of the Milwaukee Area Technical College District. Do I have a motion?
I move approval.
Second?
I'll second.
Any questions on this one? Allows us to go out to market for next month. Okay, so hearing none, we have a motion by Director Foley and a second by Director Hamilton for resolution F0221-03-22. Gwen, can you please take a roll call vote?
Director Foley,
Aye.
Director Hamilton,
Aye.
Director Mediator Ramos,
Aye.
Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Baker,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
and Director Olson.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, thank you. Good to see you in person.
Thank you.
Next, we have resolution F0222-03-22 to approve the technical diploma program titled CNC Swiss Turning Multi-Axis Machine 31-444-X. Dr. Decker.
Well, thank you so much. So nice to see all of you in person here. And I have my team in the back. I have Dean Becky also, and then Dale Hauser, and then I have to look at my notes here. I'm sorry, I'm going blank here. This is Chris. Yep, so my apology. So, all right, so we are seeking your approval for the concept review of the CNC Swiss multi-axis machining. Let me give you a quick overview of the program, and if you have any questions, we'll ask the team to address these questions here. This new program will complement both existing programs here at METC and provide a viable career pathway to all of our students. In fact, we are teaching some of these courses already in the program, but we exceeded the maximum number of courses and the percentage allowed by the state. And then this kind of, makes us want to kind of track into a technical diploma program, which is really good news. This will take us to the next level in the CNC and machining. Graduate earning power will increase. We're looking at $24 an hour. And then in terms of what to expect in the future, we are looking at some creation of some bilingual options for our students in this program. And finally, we're looking at dual enrollment options as well. So that's basically where we are with this concept review at this time. Any questions?
Dr. Baker.
Yeah, just one comment. I was delighted to see the EMSI data
Well, thank
on
you.
this one. I mean, we are totally in the right spot with it.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. I didn't ask for a motion on it, did I? All of a sudden we moved
No.
over into discussion because Dr. Duckworth sat down and he just jumped into that. So I will take a motion for resolution F0222-0322 to approve the technical diploma program titled CNC Swiss Turning Multi-Axis Machine.
I'll move passage.
Second.
Thank you. We do now have a motion by Director Baker and second by Director Foley. This will go by a voice vote. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, thank you, Dr.
Thanks so much.
Next, we have resolution F0223-03-22 to approve the partial fiscal year 2022-2023 renovation remodeling capital projects. Could I have a motion, this time I'll get it right, to approve that resolution? Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Janice? is going to
Yeah,
be here
so
as
good
well.
evening, everyone. This is a partial list of what we are going to be proposing for next fiscal year on our capital projects. And the purpose of bringing these a little bit early, these three particular projects, as they are high need projects, and due to supply chain and other issues in the marketplace right now, we really want to get a jump on these three particular projects so we can reach conclusion of those projects within the next fiscal year. And you will be getting the full list of the 3-year plan coming before the board in the next 2 months. And so you will see the full list of the $18 million of projects that we are proposing for this next fiscal year, as well as the 2 subsequent years after that. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to entertain any of the questions.
I just have a question about broadly what's in the HVAC, DMC, and electrical upgrades. Are we continuing to take steps that are going to save us money and lower consumption over time?
Yes, yes. So that is part of our electrical upgrades in particular. We have very old infrastructure and old systems. So the goal is to update those and maximize our sustainability efforts with those projects.
Okay, thank you.
I think we all appreciate supply chain.
There are a lot of issues right now. So yes, if we can get a jump on these, it's most helpful.
Any other questions related to the project? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion by Director Mendieta-Ramos and second by Director Foley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 She was in transit. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have some policy reviews. There are 3 of them. This is just a first reading of these. There is the approval will happen in the April meeting. We received notice on these that this is really sort of pulling apart a current policy from there. And so we have Kristen Tapato here to go through these policies with us.
Good afternoon, Charles and members of the board. Pleasure to be here in person. Just wanted to take a couple of minutes tonight. I sent a memo in advance of tonight's meeting to just give a brief explanation of the 3 policies that we're presenting for a first read this evening. We're looking to make some revisions to policy C0200, which is our equal opportunity harassment and non-discrimination policy. We're also looking to separate out and create a new policy under Title IX for sexual harassment and sexual violence. And we're looking to separate out the consensual relationships policy, which was previously contained in policy C0200. So you'll see a lot of underlines and strikeouts. So it looks like there's substantial revisions, but in reality, what we're really doing is taking what was one policy and separating it into 3 for clarity around Title IX processes, EEO policies, and then consensual relationships, which is for both students and employees and employees and employees. I will highlight one of the changes made to the consensual relationships policy has to do with reporting to HR in order to ensure that there's no punitive action taken for employees who engage in consensual relationships, so long as it's appropriately disclosed, and HR can review appropriate action. These policies have been vetted by the Employee Handbook Committee and reviewed by outside counsel. So I'm here to answer any questions. And again, this is a first read, and we'll be seeking approval next month.
Any questions, Director Baker?
Sure. So you highlighted the change to human resources. Where did the complaint go before?
Well, so the consensual relationships policy has to do with, in this case, has to do with employees engaged in consensual relationships. So typically, it's not a complaint. It's just, this is a manner in which employees can disclose that they're in this relationship, and so that HR can take appropriate action if necessary, if there's a direct supervisory relationship between the employees. Previously, it was supposed to be disclosed, the policy was to be disclosed to the supervisor.
Okay.
So we thought it was more appropriate to be disclosed to HR.
Just a question as to what direct means. If you have a stacked department or stacked reporting responsibilities and the immediate supervisor is not engaged in the relationship, but his or her supervisor is, does this policy apply to that person on top?
I think that would be taken on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the specific department is and whether how much control the supervisor has and how many degrees of separation there would be between the employees.
Okay, and under what policy would that individual have a responsibility to report it in the first instance? Because this doesn't apply, because it's not a direct relationship.
So in that circumstance, the employee engaged in the consensual relationship would not need to report if it was not his or her direct supervisor.
Can I jump in? I have a question. So when I read it, it does clarify that if you have influence over evaluation or anything else, you also have to disclose, which is pretty typical language. So Director Foley, in the example you're giving where a boss's boss would be in a relationship with a indirect employee, they would have influence over evaluation and other influence. And so they would then, at least the way that I read the policy, which is pretty standard language, would require them to disclose because they would be able to influence evaluations or ratings or performance evaluations, any of those types of things. So that would fall into this policy based on how I read it.
Yeah, let me just respond to that because I read that same sentence you're referring to and drew the opposite conclusion from it, which tells me it's at least ambiguous.
Okay. So then we should clarify that because it should read that if you have, so typically those policies are considered sphere of influence. So if you are within my sphere of influence, then I should have to disclose because I could inappropriately influence any part of your employment. So if you read it the opposite way, or if it's not clear, then I would agree that needs to be clarified.
The problem is that the word direct could modify only the word supervisory, or it could modify the entire clause supervisory or evaluative responsibilities. You can fix that with punctuation or by repeating the word, whatever the intent is. I think in my view is that the intent needs to be as broad as Director Case was reflecting, because obviously the boss's boss could influence the direct supervisor or evaluative person, and you'd never see it, right? Be invisible.
Yes, that is true. And I will make sure we make those revisions and send them to the board in advance of the next meeting.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just out of curiosity, I mean, most of the time when we see these types of revisions, there was an incident or something that kind of pointed out a flaw in the policy. Is that what happened here, or were we just simply updating?
What really prompted this was, if you may recall, in 2020, the DOE released the new regulations related to Title IX. And so we, like many other universities, created two procedures under one policy. And what we found that it did was it really conflated the Title IX procedures with the EEO procedures. And Title IX's procedures are very, very statutory and are very broad yet prescriptive at the same time. And so we wanted to clarify our policies under EEO, harassment and discrimination, which is more of the Title VII and sex discrimination, versus sexual violence and sexual harassment, which now has a different definition and a higher standard under Title IX. It's severe and pervasive and subjective or objectively offensive, which is different than Title VII. So the goal was really to separate them. And then as we were reviewing, we noticed that the consensual relation, well, in my opinion, the consensual relationships policy seemed misplaced and really appeared to deserve a section of its own, a policy of its own.
Sure.
So that's what prompted the separation and the decoupling.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for the explanation and any questions. I think that helped us all understand and make sense of the logic.
Great.
So they will come back in April for approval then. And we will look for a little bit of clarification on that with the word direct there, maybe modifying both of those phrases. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
We are ready to move on to the reports section of the agenda. First is the chairperson's report. So just to let everybody know, next week on March 29th at 9 o'clock, the MATC District Board Appointment Meeting, as happens annually, will be held in this room, I believe. We don't know, virtually.
It's hybrid.
It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid. Okay, so people wanted to attend. Yep. Okay. Just So there are three positions that are up for appointment this year. The position currently held by Director Wilson, which is the additional member role. Position that is currently held by Director Hamilton, which is the elected official position. And then the position currently held by Director Mendieta Ramos, which is the employer with 15 plus employees. So we will find out shortly after that process, the appointment of those board members. Good news, April 28th through the 30th, so just over a month, the Wisconsin Technical College District Boards Association, which of course it has its own acronym, is going to be holding their spring meeting here in Milwaukee. So Thursday night, there is a kickoff dinner here, and it's being held at the Milwaukee Doubletree Hilton Hotel. So, and then Friday morning's in-service is on accreditation, which we will be featuring our own Dr. Mannion, who we'll be hearing from later tonight. So she's going to be presenting on accreditation of the technical college system. That's the focus of that meeting. So I am going to strongly encourage, since it is in Milwaukee, any board members to attend the dinner the night before. I think it's a good event, and then also the in-service. So if you remember, Steve Tempest sent out an email to everybody on March 2nd about the information. Obviously, we don't need lodging being here in Milwaukee. There was a link to registration on there. So if you feel comfortable registering yourself, please do so. If you would like Gwen or someone else to register, please let them know. Right now, besides that, they're looking at a couple places to tour that are here. So they wait to decide. You can sign up for either in person or virtual. So that registration 2 weeks before, they usually ask you to register by so they can plan for how many people will be attending. So please register sooner rather than later. So our attendance can be included in there, because that does influence some of the activities or events or what that is. So Mark, would you like to share anything else about that, since you attend on behalf of
Sure, sure. There is also a Saturday morning meeting of the Board of Directors of the District Boards Association. I'm a member of that board. You are all welcome to attend. That really consists of 3 subcommittees, and you can attend each of those, and then a final executive committee meeting. There's been some controversy over the course of the last year about how that executive team has done evaluations of District Board Association's employees. That continues to some extent. We'll have to see whether that's an issue. But I would also encourage you to attend to get the sense of what the group is about. One of the things it offers that we don't take very much advantage of is that they have a large number of online resources for board members. They have programming on what it means to be a policy board. They have programming on the state statutes. They have materials on how to conduct a board meeting or participate in one. We're intended to be very much hands-on, and I think they go largely unused, or at least I think they have here. So it would be a good opportunity to talk to people from the other boards to see what they're doing, but also to see what value they find in active participation in the organization.
Thank you. Thank you for serving on behalf of METC. And maybe that's something that we can use as we talk about our summer retreat here. Those resources might be good. And just for everybody else, on March 4th, the MATC board held a retreat. It was virtual. We were originally going to be in person. Dr. Pamela Fisher, who is part of ACCT, facilitated that retreat. For part of it, she discussed the critical role of the board of directors and sort of presented to us an overview of best practices. And then our own Dr. Mannion talked about the board self-evaluation tool. And talked about how that goal is really to align it with the Higher Learning Commission, which sometimes we forget that we're the compliance piece of it versus, oh wait, there's another goal or expectations there of our governing board. So we're going to talk more about that evaluation tool as we will complete it in the next month or so, but then hoping to hold our summer retreat after our board organization meeting on Monday, July 11th. So hopefully we mark our calendars and we'll let, after the appointment meeting next week, we will sort of talk about that and make sure everybody who is appointed is aware of that date also. So that concludes my chair's report, and it is time for the president's report.
Well, thank you, Chair Olson, and good evening, board members, faculty, staff, students, community members. My report includes some highlights of what's been going on. A leading national publication, the Chronicle of Higher Ed, which I'm sure many are familiar with, released an article titled "How Colleges Can Reach the Lost Freshmen of 2020." METC was highlighted for using its students to track down would-be classmates. Teams of student ambassadors called more than 1,000 students from the class of 2020 who had previously applied for a grant from the METC Promise program for new high school graduates to let them know that our deadline had been extended. I want to thank Maruela Santiago, Erica Fernandez, Sarah Cafford, and the Promise team for their leadership on this. Our METC Stormers men's basketball program continued its winning ways this year. The team completed an outstanding regular season with a record of 25-4. The team was ranked 5th in the National Junior Collegiate Athletic Association poll and was ranked inside the top 15 nationally the entire season. For the fourth time, or actually the third time in 4 years, they won the NJCAA District Midwest B Championship. Our head coach and athletic director, Randy Casey, was named the Region 4 Midwest B District Coach of the Year, the third time also in 4 years. Coach Randy Casey earned this honor. In addition, a 6'6" METC freshman forward Mason Johnson was named the tournament's most valuable player. Mason was also named 2022 North Central Community College Conference Player of the Year. The Stormers advanced to the NJCAA National Tournament in Danville, Illinois, and after a victory against Scottsdale Community College, the Stormer seasons came to an end, unfortunately, but they represented our college so well along the way. Congratulations to the team, coaches Randy Casey and Travis Mosrick. I'm also pleased to announce the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development has named David Polk, METC Director of Apprenticeship and Trade, to serve as Director of the agency's Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards. As the Director of Apprenticeship and Trade at METC, David Polk managed more than 30 different Milwaukee area apprenticeships and adopted 6 new sector apprenticeships, including the first apprenticeship program for arborists in the US. I have to tell you, every meeting I went to, every single person who ever worked with David just remarked at what a wonderful human being he was and what a great leader he was too for us. He represented the college very well, and we are very, very happy for this position for him. He really deserved it. Also good news, the Wisconsin Technical College Systems Board took action at the March 16th board meeting on funding decisions for grant applications. This is the first time I can remember in my very long tenure at METC that the college was awarded funding for every single grant they applied for and every single dollar they applied for. So the college at the end will receive over $1 million in grant funds from the state. The systems president noted that several of our grant applications were outstanding, creative, and innovative. Thank you, Dr. Jennifer Micule, the Grants Council, Dr. Christine Mannion, and all those who contributed to this effort. And Dr. Mannion, do you want to talk at all about the top outstanding grants that they mentioned?
Sure, I can.
Just briefly.
Yeah, sure. Some of them, that kind of rose to the top. One focused on career pathways, which is a focus on getting Black and Brown students into the lucrative IT careers. Another one was in our Gen Ed pathway, which is addressing the equity gap found in math in our Associate of Science transfer program. So we'll be providing classroom support for those students as needed. And then we had a really great one about a new program launched for the Diagnostic Medical Sonography program. That's going to be a very expensive program, and it's a very important one, and it's a great opportunity for our future students. And they're going to help us both get the support we need for the students, but also the equipment we need in the labs. So those are some of the highlights.
Thank you, appreciate it. And also in February, we hosted question and answer sessions with employees in our new flexible work arrangements. You'll recall you approved the policy on that. I joined with Vice President El Bonds to hear employee feedback, questions, and concerns. We will continue to listen to issues as we begin to implement this new structure at our college. And hopefully this will help us to attract and retain our employees. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Next, we will have our district student senate report with our student Patrick Casper.
Thank you, Lisa Olson, Dr. Vicky Martin, members of the MATC District Board and Administration. My name is Patrick Casper. Happy to be here again today and here, and for the first time ever in person. So that's pretty cool. To provide updates as the student board representative of the District Student Government Association. I want to start with an update regarding the high flex concern I mentioned in the last meeting. Since then, there has been a work study student appointed to the course to assist with the technical aspects of the class. I feel the concerns I spoke of have been heard and addressed efficiently and effectively. I appreciate the creative and prompt solution for the concerns I was witnessing. There has been a lot of movement in DSGA. One notable development is the approval of an esports feasibility study to be completed by Esports Supply. The study will provide a total addressable market assessment, technical assessment with recommendations, and set up MATC to make critical decisions regarding a varsity level esport, which is electronic sports or gaming as a varsity program. This is groundbreaking due to the engagement, recruitment, and excitement this could bring to the college. Additionally, a student organization manual from Student Life was approved by DSGA. This manual will be a guide for prospective and current student organizations to help them with all aspects of running a student organization. This includes forming an organization, fundraising, event planning, and more. Lastly, I'm told this would be a fan favorite. I don't understand it, but DSGA approved a standard operating procedure for Wisconsin Statute 38.145, the use of student fees. Woohoo. Here we are. People have spoken. This approval documents the practice approving the use of student activity fee budgets and ensures the student voice is in the process. In conclusion, I want to thank you all for your time and the opportunity to present these updates and developments from the perspective of a student leader at MATC. It is gratifying to know that the students' concerns are heard and addressed here at MATC.
Thank you for that update. Very interesting.
Informative and entertaining.
It was all of
There we go.
it was.
And we're getting esports.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. Next is our enrollment report, and Tony Taylor is here somewhere. There he is.
Good afternoon, members of the board. As noted, Tony Taylor, Chief Marketing Officer, standing in today for Dr. Sarah Adams, our Interim Vice President of Enrollment Management. And so, Beth, if we can show this slide. Much appreciated. So this data is as of March 10th. And so when we look at the current term for spring, when we see the kind of three big buckets that make up our spring enrollment. So how many students that says spring, but it's actually referencing fall. So what's the percentage of students retained from fall term? So down slightly compared year to year, but we're seeing more students new to MATC and more students returning from earlier. And so when you look at the chart below, you can see kind of that as this fiscal and academic year has progressed, we've done a better job getting closer to our target. But like other colleges in the technical college system, when I talk to my colleagues around the state, we're tending to see good numbers of head count of students, but students aren't taking as many credits. Potentially they're out in the workforce, which is a challenge because of rising wages, and that can make that more attractive than a technical college experience at the moment. And we're looking to address that in various ways. But you can see that for spring, we've achieved 90%. So that's basically a snapshot of where we are this term and overall for the year. And then Beth, I believe there's a second slide. And so this is looking at full-time equivalent student attainment on a month-by-month basis. And so you can see that when we're looking at the spring numbers, you can kind of see that on a monthly basis of where we would see certainly stronger in November, a little bit weaker over the winter months, but kind of overall staying on pace when you look at the overall period of kind of when you take this snapshot that starts a little bit later in the academic year, looking to be in a stronger position, which is also reflected on the prior slide when you see that kind of as the terms go forward, we're performing stronger compared to our goal. So that's just a snapshot for this month, and certainly open to any questions, and I have colleagues who can speak additionally.
Okay, so are we moving on to this, or we're pausing before we get into the financial?
I think we can
impact,
take
or-
a pause.
Okay. Director Cole.
I just have a quick question. Why is the goal for the spring semester so much lower than the goal for the fall semester? Is that just because historically that's the way it's been, or?
Typically we do, and I'll pull up, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing, or if we take a step back.
Back another slide. There you go. 4261 versus 3767. Why is there? That's a 12% difference roughly.
Yeah, and I don't know if there are colleagues who can speak to that. The thing that I would observe from where I stand is that we certainly have more students starting in fall, and so you could have shorter term programs that are already completed by the time the spring term starts.
Yeah, but why aren't we enrolling people in the shorter term programs for the spring?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's anyone else who could speak to
Right.
that.
It's just that typically our history has been that most students start thinking about the fall as the way to start school. The last few years, though, we've done a little bit better than our goal well before the pandemic. We started to see that increase for the very reasons that you said. We were starting to look at more adults coming back to that second.
I just wonder if there's something we're missing about the difference between what motivates people to sign up in the fall versus what motivates people to sign up for the spring, and that maybe that requires a different marketing approach depending on what that motivation is. I don't know. I'm just seeing the differential and saying
Could it be
why.
that classes are being offered?
Certainly that's in the mix. And again, other people can speak to this. One thing that I'm observing from my seat in the marketing world is that as we're offering more 8-week classes, more 12-week classes, conversations that we have with the marketing agency, whether we're talking to future students or current students, is that there really at this point very few months of the year when you can't be starting a class at MATC, right? When we're just now shifting our approach in terms of how we communicate about registration for students who are either newly applied, returning from a prior term, or our current students. We're saying get ready for summer and fall. So that really means classes starting in June, August, September, and October. And then when the next big registration period opens in November, we'll be talking about classes starting in December, January, February, I'm making sure my math is right, and I believe March, right? So there's basically only a very limited period as we kind of make this shift towards more 8-week classes. There are really only a handful of months where you can't start at MATC, whereas in a historical model, you would have August and January, and then there's some small classes in December and June. But now we've got most of the months of the year, and that's reflected in our marketing approach as well.
Director Baker.
Yeah, and I mean, over the years, I've seen exactly what President Martin was referring to, that, you know, people think about, I'm gonna go back to school in September. It's just sort of a long time tradition, and I think it's our marketing that helps us break through on that, and probably even the growth of virtual learning. That's also going to have more and more people just saying, I need a course now, I want to enroll now, and for us to be responsive to that. I also, just one other thing I wanted to comment, that it's pleasing to see the advance that we made from 2021. I mean, it's noticeable.
It is a question, I think, when we think traditionally you start school because a program or a series starts in the fall, but we're supposed to be breaking the mold and we're not the traditional mold, then we need to promote the non-traditional mold, maybe a little bit more. Otherwise, we're just feeding into what people believe. And yeah, that's a good point. So the fiscal piece on that is Jeff or somebody going to be addressing that next slide.
Sure, I can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
This slide speaks to the enrollment impact on revenue. And I'm going to jump down to Tony talked about what we're 13 close, roughly 13% behind at that point. But just to remind you that 100 FTEs is equivalent to roughly $571,000 of lost revenue. So if we look at the total picture, we're the lost revenue with respect to budget is down $6.4 million. So, and then just underneath that, those are the plans that are in place. The plans were to drive additional revenue, reduce discretionary spend. Discretionary spend is anything other than people-related costs, it's wages and benefits. And then also as positions become open, people retire, people leave the college, we just don't refill those positions automatically. So we have a position prioritization team that helps us to determine, is that a student-facing position, or and do we need to fill that position or not? And then the fourth approach is to use HERF funding, institutional funds, to help close the financial gaps. And later on, I'll be talking a little bit more about our forecast for this year and our revenue impact related to FTEs. So.
Just as a reminder, this was sort of my ask to bring this piece of the enrollment report forward. We've added this a few months ago because we hear the enrollment report, but I think it's important as board members to understand what the impact of it. I mean, we can look at percentages up or down 1% or whatever, but the reality is like, what does that mean besides courses and that? Like it has a significant impact on revenue, which ultimately has some pieces. So part of it is connecting where this is happening here to this connection here, because they're not isolated events. They connect each other. So and we're going to continue to try to make sure that items that appear on the agenda, we understand as a board what that impact has to us or decision that we might have to make as it relates to that. So thanks, Jeff, for that. We are ready to move on to our Milwaukee PBS General Manager's Report with Bodan Zachary.
Good afternoon, Chair Olson, board members, Dr. Martin. Here's some highlights since we last almost met, but 2 months ago. I'll start this month, if I can get the slides, with a look at our fundraising drive during March that just concluded. The final numbers were revised this morning, and I created this deck last night. So I'll just give you the update where we've raised $206,797 from just over 1,100 donors, reaching 94% of our projected financial goal. Nationwide and locally, stations in the PBS system have experienced similar shortages during this drive, largely due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The viewing public turned to news stations, which experienced through the roof ratings of the invasion coverage. We'll have one additional fundraising drive in June to end this fiscal year and hope to do better in the next one. We're also facing headwinds of inflation, rising gas prices, and the spring weather that's gotten viewers away from their sets to the outdoors to enjoy life beyond television. I'm also happy to report that we're experiencing strength in the planned giving area, and we've raised $589,000 to date. Next slide, please. So turning to production, I'm really excited to show you several screens of Milwaukee PBS staff members that I'm enormously proud of. The prestigious Milwaukee Press Club has recognized the work of Milwaukee PBS with 8 awards this year. On May 6th at the annual Milwaukee Press Club dinner, we will learn whether our awards are in the gold, silver, or bronze categories. Next slide, please. This recognition is testament, next slide, to the dedication of our staff at Milwaukee PBS for creating an outstanding body of work. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And last slide. Congratulations to all our winners. We'll go to the next slide. Last December, Milwaukee PBS hosted a workshop of regional filmmakers of color. The event was produced by Firelight Media, which is award-winning director Stanley Nelson's production company, with funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I'm happy to report that Firelight has selected Milwaukee PBS to provide additional editorial and community engagement support to local filmmaker and media scholar Marquise Mays. Marquise is currently an associate lecturer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He'll be working with Everett Marshburn and other Milwaukee PBS staff members over the course of the year. We have also received, as part of this effort, a $10,000 grant from Firelight Media. Next slide, please. And my last report is about a very special project, Milwaukee's Next Mayor. Milwaukee PBS, in partnership with WWM Milwaukee's NPR and CBS 58 and WMLW, is producing a conversation with acting Mayor Cavalier Johnson and Bob Donovan. Milwaukee, next slide, please. Milwaukee PBS's Everett Marshburn and WWM's Mayan Silver will interview the mayoral candidates, along with CBS 58's Mike Strelo will be the moderator. The special will air on Thursday, March 31st on all three stations, Milwaukee PBS, WWM, and CBS 58's WMLW from 7 to 8 p.m. in the evening. I invite you to watch our special. That concludes my report for tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I've never before heard you admit that there was life beyond public television, and I'm just wondering what has caused that change.
The reality of not hitting goals. We always count on bad weather. December we do great. You know, any inclement weather we welcome and cherish. And we knew that we were going into that time of the year, and then we saw just across the board, every PBS station got hit really hard during this drive because the Russian invasion, inflation, all the factors I mentioned have really impacted people. So we're now really on guard with what happens over the coming months, just because of, you know, the changed world we're in. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
I think I see Remy on the Zoom call.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, so we have our legislative matters report. I think that was distributed to us for those of us in person.
Great.
Remy?
Great. Thank you, Director Olson. Good evening, everyone. I enjoy seeing everyone in the room today, and I look forward to seeing you all in person next month. I'm going to jump around a little bit with the report this evening. First, I just want to start by saying that the 2021-22 legislative session is adjourned. It was a long session. It was a partisan session. It was difficult to accomplish goals generally, but I do not see the legislature coming back in. There could be exceptions, of course, for extraordinary sessions, special session calls, veto floor periods, et cetera, but I think all would be very unlikely. I think legislators are eager to start running for re-election. Any legislation that failed to pass then needs to be reintroduced in 2023. Next session that will start in January of next year. What I did, I included the ongoing list of legislative proposals at the very bottom of the report this evening. Many of these we've seen now for several months over and over, but there is one piece of legislation that, although it did fail to pass, I want to highlight because I would have addressed it last month at the board meeting, which I know was canceled due to weather. But this bill, Assembly Bill 973 and Senate Bill 981, that's at the very bottom of the board report. It was introduced very late in session, about 2 or 3 weeks before session adjourned. It's a rather robust piece of legislation. Some portions of it are either not relevant to the technical college system and the colleges, or perhaps, areas we support. There were 2 provisions, though, that were problematic for us. And so we had to work quickly. I just want to give props to Layla. She really led the effort here. We made some targeted contacts to our own legislators, but the 2 areas in particular that were very problematic with this proposal is that, one, it would award transcripted credit for all high school youth apprenticeship courses. So that would include courses taught by third parties. And also it would award advanced standing and associate degree programs to newly defined apprenticeship courses. Just to back up, this language really, I think, is a result of a desire from some organizations to allow credit to be earned by apprenticeship programs that they offer. The problem, of course, is that if these are not technical college courses or courses that are vetted or courses that are a part of degreed programs, that threatens accreditation. So I'll be brief in describing that. There may be others in the room who, if there are questions, could go into more detail there. But those were the 2 areas of this bill that were extremely problematic. The bill did move through the Assembly relatively quickly. It had to go to the Joint Committee on Finance because it had a small fiscal estimate. The committee did move it out of that process, but I do just want to compliment Senator Dale Coenga. He spoke out with some concerns about the substance of the bill. He voted to move it out of committee just from a fiscal perspective, but had expressed some concerns with the bill in general. And ultimately, the Senate did not end up taking up the bill. They did not take it to the floor. So I think it was a combination of some concerns that several senators brought forward, and also the fiscal attached, and the fact that it was a relatively robust bill toward the end of session. So I just wanted to make a point to highlight that particular proposal for you all this evening, because it was not something that you would have otherwise seen before, and it was introduced relatively late in session. And it could be something that would come back next session. It again is being pushed by several organizations to try to get some of these changes in state law. And I would expect that, given all the work that went into it, it may be something that we'll see next session as well. Moving back up to the agenda, I also just wanted to highlight that while session is adjourned, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's quiet in Madison. The next biennial budget process will begin this summer. Typically, state agencies start looking at their budgets. They'll get budget instructions from the governor, and then the agencies need to submit their budgets to the Department of Administration by September. And from there, the governor reviews those and compiles a budget. These agency requests are generally fairly vanilla, often just cost to continue. And then, of course, the governor provides a more robust budget that's introduced next year. Certainly, this process becomes much more complicated if we have a change in administration. And so we'll see what happens in November. But regardless of the election, the work continues, and agencies will continue to start working on their budgets based on budget instructions that would be provided by Governor Evers. Very small federal update here. After a month of negotiations, the House has passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act. It provides some increases, particularly in the area of Pell Grant maximum, for an increase of $400. So again, that's the legislative portion that I wanted to provide an update on with the list of legislation below. I wanted to highlight very briefly redistricting election investigation and the 2022 elections, because they're all grabbing so many headlines. Redistricting in particular will have a big impact on the election this year. I also included a list of announced retirements. That's relevant to us from a legislative perspective, because certainly we'll have new faces. We may need to get to know. Leadership is changing fairly substantially in both houses. Some key committee assignments will be opening up, both the Joint Committee on Finance and also specific to colleges and universities. Right now, unless the courts change something with the maps that we're looking at, Senator Dale Coenga, who is on the Finance Committee, but also involved in colleges and universities, he was redistricted out of his district, so he will not be running for reelection as a result. And there are a couple of other important domino effects that are being created by the map. So not providing this for a political commentary by any means, but it absolutely has an impact on advocacy and legislation. So again, provided the list of announced retirements for you to all review. There are a number of them. I expect more to come. We also will have all new Dem leadership in the Senate due to retirements, and the Assembly Dems have already selected a slate of new leaders there as well. So again, lots of changes that we're looking at for next session as a result of redistricting and then just the upcoming election. The election investigation, again, just relevant more from a headline perspective. And I think with that, I will pause and see if there are any questions or comments, and I will answer any of those in more detail.
Ollie.
I just have a comment. Rami, you mentioned Layla as having done some significant work on, I think it was the last two items on the list. For those who don't know, Layla Merrifield is the executive director of the Wisconsin Technical College District Boards Association. And one of the things that we get here is kind of a two-barreled approach to our approach to the legislatures, because Rami and her colleagues are out there speaking directly for MATC. Layla is representing the 16 technical colleges as a group. And one of the reasons we participate in the boards association is because there have been times when not being recognized as an MATC want item has made it more possible to get a MATC want item than when certain legislatures knew it was us who wanted it. Because there is some negative pushback from some, and when I say representatives, I'm being intentionally vague about which house or what have you. So Rami's doing great work, and this other thing is going on outside. And I don't know if there's active coordination, but we certainly end up in the same position on most of the issues.
Yeah, I would say we definitely coordinate. I know Layla was participating with us with our legislative visits. I think that's helpful, just having that expertise. They do this all day long, every single day. And so on this, we coordinated, for example, where they were sort of the front-facing voice. And I know that they were asking colleges to make contacts to their legislators. So again, I think Senator Cuenga was really helpful in that regard. And then at times, we have some very specific MATC issues that will come up, the spectrum auction being one. We had an issue with our mortuary program. And so that's something when then, we do the push there. But definitely, I think a coordinated effort is always helpful. So many associations work that way where they have more boots on the ground as a result.
Any other questions for Rami? If not, thank you for that report, and we look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Thank you.
Next, we have our DEI report by Ava Martinez-Palos.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing great. Good to see everyone in person still. So as part of the DEI report today, we have two items. Is an update on the HSI, and then I will hand it over to my colleague, Dan McColgan, Director of Labor Relations, to talk about the affirmative action plan. Okay, so I'll begin with the HSI update. As you remember, in 2019, MATC announced that we wanted to become a Hispanic serving institution, which entails enrolling 25% of Hispanic student population at MATC. As of today, we are at 18.5% enrollment for Hispanic Latinx students, and we still have some work to do in that area. Most recently, we have been able to work within the academics and also within our student services to be able to provide services to our Hispanic student population from both of those ends. What I wanted to also highlight is that as we strive to become a Hispanic serving institution and reaching the 25%, there are many benefits that come with the designation. One of the biggest benefits is that as we reach the 25%, that we will now be eligible to apply for Title VII grants, federal grants, that will be available to MATC to provide equity and inclusion services to all student populations. I think that sometimes when we think about becoming an HSI, sometimes we think about, well, we're only doing those services for particular populations. Well, right now, because that is one of the largest growing populations in the United States and will continue to grow, we need to ensure that we are providing services to that population and also being very mindful and intentional about also serving other populations as well. So for example, I know that sometimes in the work of DEI, we have a lot of different populations within DEI. We want to make sure that as we're serving Hispanic students, we're also serving our Black students or Asian students or Native American students and other populations. When it comes to becoming an HSI and qualifying for those grants, I'm really looking forward to it, because those funds available to us would mean that we could enhance our academic programs within MATC to ensure that we provide a lot more equity within those programmings, but then we can also use those funds to enhance our student services. So I think one of the biggest things that I wanted to highlight is that as we continue to work towards becoming an HSI, that we also want to make sure that HSI is also an equity initiative. So as we qualify for those grants, we're also thinking about enhancing services, both student services and academics for all students. So let's see what else. I think I wanted to just highlight a little bit of that. I think that we continue to move the needle, and we are very conscious that as we continue to become an HSI, that we need to make sure that we are expanding our markets in terms of recruitment within advertising, recruitment, enrollment, and admissions, and making sure that we have a strong pipeline to be able to also retain our Latinx students. Thank you. I welcome any questions.
Dr. Baker.
Yeah, this is, I wasn't on the board when we started this work. And so the key metric for us to become the HSI is really to reach that population level in our students, because the other services and whatnot, we're already very solid in.
Yes, we
So
can, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we continue to improve our services. I think that when it comes to becoming an HSI, is not just only about the numbers or reaching the 25%. It's also understanding that we need to be ready to be serving our Hispanic and students of color, right? And I think that it goes hand in hand. I think our goal is to, yes, reach the destination, to be able to apply and qualify for those grants, but then at the same time, improve our services to all student populations, especially our students of color. So thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes.
When you say services, what specifically are you talking about?
We're talking about when we look at our student success pipeline, we're looking at the services that we provide from the moment that we begin recruiting our students to how our students experience our admissions and application process, to the way our students register, to the way our students experience the process within our financial aid process, the way our students are retained at MATC, and also how they're experiencing our academic environment. So when we think about enhancing those services and continue to work towards improving so that we are ready for the populations that are continue to grow, such as our Hispanic students, I mean that the entire pipeline of the student success experience. Does that answer your question, Director Wilson?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the second part, I guess, or the second report?
Okay, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Dan.
So this is our semi-annual affirmative action report, which comes to the board obviously semi-annually. So.
Right. Remarkable.
The obvious.
Yeah, I believe, and thank you for having us here today. The last report we gave was the annual report back in September. So this will be looking at a lot of the data, trying to highlight what's in attachment. I think 7G, some of the highlights from those statistics in there. And so we are under a 5-year affirmative action plan that spans from 2019 to 2024. And a lot of the data we're looking at here is related to one of our main goals of balancing our employment of faculty and staff to match availability with the general population of the greater Milwaukee area and the populations we serve. And we also want to better reflect the population of our students. So this first slide is kind of a snapshot. You can see in the MATC percentage column that reflects the percent of MATC employees in each of those categories. The district workforce column is the census data from the district area that we serve in terms of the population. And then you can see the difference in the far right-hand column. So there's not much change in this data from when we reported out the data as it was as of June 30th of 2021. There was a little bit of an uptick in terms of minority employment going from 40.64% to 42.2%. And in terms of Blacks from 24.43 to 25.96, so about a 1.6 gain in each of those categories. And also in the board report today, and I think in the consent agenda items, there's the HR hiring report. I think there's some things there that supports that increase. So in terms of new hires, when we looked at it, for the current fiscal year, 50% of our new hires have been minority employees, and 31% of our new hires have been African American. So that exceeds, generally where our population is right now. That's about 8 percentage points better where our current minority employees are, and then about another 5 points higher for Blacks. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide reflects the occupational categories. There's 7 of them, you can see, and in 6 of the 7, we are exceeding the district workforce percentages, and I think in 5 of the 6 by double-digit margins, which is very, very good. The one that always sticks out is the skilled crafts. We don't have any minority participation in those groups. Those positions are kind of slow to turn over. It was talked about in a previous meeting. We are looking to kind of grow our own apprenticeship program and kind of grow our own employees in that regard. But other than that, generally strong performance in most of the other categories. Next slide, please. This reflects the female full-time employment by EEO category, again, with the 7 categories. The MATC population in these categories exceeds the district workforce percentage pretty comfortably in 5 of the 7 areas. Where we are lacking, again, are skilled crafts and the service maintenance groups. Next slide, please. This reflects faculty full-time positions as of the end of the calendar year. It would be mid-year of our fiscal year. And these numbers are very, very similar to what you saw in September. There wasn't really much. I think most of these are less than 1% movement up or down. A couple of things to point out, though, some complementary information in terms of this. In the hiring report in the consent agenda, there's some detailed statistics in terms of hiring. And when we looked at this, we found that, regarding promotions, 41% of the faculty promotions from within were minority employees. And so when you see our general statistic there of 32.14%, that is a pretty significant jump in terms of kind of growing our own. A lot of these cases, they may come from the part-time faculty ranks, or we do have a number of paraprofessionals that are part-time faculty as well that get promoted to full-time faculty. In terms of new hires, and when you look at the hiring data in the consent agenda, the numbers aren't quite as strong in terms of performance there, but we do have a number of initiatives that we are working on to kind of help in this regard, because obviously this is a very big focus when you consider, I think it's approximately 15% of our 56% of our students are minority students. And although we're doing very well in terms of the workforce percentage and availability, we're still pretty far short in terms of the population we serve. And I know this is a big goal, it's a big initiative for the college, but we do have the DEI group.
Would it be okay if I just drilled into that?
Sure.
For a moment? So who is that 18.7% when we're talking, because that's different than the other, like sort of broad workforce. So is that higher ed faculty? Is that all people in the teaching profession?
Yeah, 18.46% reflects the number of Black instructors at MATC.
The 18.7 in the minority faculty, that top number, that 18.7% of the district workforce? are
Yes, that
minorities.
is the greater Milwaukee community and the population we serve. So that's the local availability, and obviously we need to expand our reach, and we are doing a number of things to try and expand our reach.
Let me try the question one more time. So is that just the workforce that's in education?
Those are faculty, college
So those are
faculty
college. So what
yes.
we're looking at is we're comparing ourselves to the pool that is
available.
Marquette professors, UWM professors.
Waukesha, well,
Bridge,
yeah, probably wouldn't,
whatever.
yeah.
Because I might say that actually our goals maybe should be a tad higher, because our faculty also are reflective of workplaces that are not just educational workplaces.
Yes.
You know, we have all this technical faculty, we have faculty from healthcare, from culinary, where those workforces are more diverse than college faculty. So I'm just, we may actually be, I think maybe we should shoot a little higher.
Yes, and that's a good point, Director Baker. And I think it's on the presidential scorecard or on our strategic plan scorecard. We have a goal, I think, of full-time and part-time faculty combined. We were 29% last year. We have a goal to increase it 2% each year.
The question is valid, and I'm not so sure I want to make sure that we're understanding what that is.
You get it.
Because I know you, yeah, I'm a data. So on the previous category, we looked at other than faculty, like the previous slide, it wasn't faculty. So that district workforce.
The very first slide was all employees.
Right. So when you look at the district workforce percentages, they keep changing.
There you go.
So
38 point.
yeah. So when you look at faculty and when you say district, are you talking within the MATC boundaries?
Yes.
Okay,
The
so then that wouldn't
availability, we get that
include
data.
WCTC. So you're looking at any post-secondary institution within the boundaries of MATC and looking at their faculty. Right.
When you're looking at the faculty number, yes. All employees is a little more complicated, which.
And that I get, that is complicated. I was just, because we're in a very highly densely populated area of the state, but yet it extends a little bit outside of Milwaukee County when you go a little bit north of here, and that's why I'm just wondering who that includes. But that's because we have a lot of universities, public and private, within our footprint as compared to like WCTC, for example. Their district workforce would look very different in the faculty piece of it. So,
and if I could just follow up, also our faculty, our faculty are also welders and electricians and nurses and chefs. So that's not like an apples to apples with a UW professor or Marquette professor. Right. You know, so that's why I'm saying that when we're recruiting our faculty, we're not just recruiting from a pool of people who teach at universities, we're recruiting also from these industries that are more diverse than the higher ed workforce. That's kind of my point. The higher ed workforce is a pretty white workforce. And so that's why I'm saying I'd love to see our goal should be a little higher than that 18.7. If we're just comparing ourselves to the higher ed workforce.
Right, and there is an overall,
Okay.
there is an overall college goal of 29%,
which sounds
full-time and part-time combined. And we are aiming to increase that, I think, 2% each year for the next several years. And some of the things we're doing with that, the Office of DEI and HR are partnering to develop a faculty fellows program, to hopefully grow some more of our own. We are trying to leverage resources outside of our immediate district to source more instructors of color in terms of leveraging technology with LinkedIn and Indeed and Google. And there's ways we have our talent acquisition staff going through training how to leverage those electronic resources to source more candidates of color. So those are a few of the things we're doing in that regard.
this is one of the traps of statistics. I mean, you don't really know what the comparison is unless you ask. And I was watching those 3 slides go by and seeing those numbers change and had no idea what it was. And I'm glad you asked the question because you did it a lot more competently than I would have. But can we roll back to the 2 previous slides for just a moment and see what those numbers are? So here, the district workforce number is what exactly?
For which category?
Well, that's the question.
There's occupations within each category. So executive administrative, just for an example, would obviously be members of the president's cabinet down to managers, supervisors.
I think you had one that had an overall workforce number.
That was the very first
Yes.
slide.
Maybe go back to that one. There you go.
Okay, so the overall workforce, any full-time position of whatever kind in the district is 38.27% minority.
Correct.
Okay. And so now what we're questioning by doing this is, are we really focused on the right subcategories there and how those compare? Can we go back to the 2 slides down?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to direct this like this, but one more. Okay, so I'm not sure how we capture the data for the groups you're talking about. How do we capture plumbers and electricians and the other categories
Although
so that number becomes more meaningful?
I think that MATC's instructors, by and large, should reflect the workforce in our district. More than our instructors reflect just the higher ed workforce. But I just pulled that right out of the air. So I don't,
Right.
I don't. think
And we get the
database
district
backs that up.
workforce data from the WTCS, who pulls it from census data. I could do a deeper dive to see, because they provide this for all 16 tech colleges in the system. So
have
we
the
are not
number.
unique in that regard. Waukesha, Gateway, and others are hiring welders and plumbers and those kinds of, and I can check with them to see if they are accounting for that
Yeah, I mean, you have the number.
in the data, in the workforce data percentage, because that's given to us.
Yeah, you might, if that's possible, it would be useful to look at those with the breakdowns. If we're talking about full-time, I don't know how you break it down, but when we use the example of the Marquette University professor, if we could have a category that shows the comparison of that kind of an instructor and then perhaps trades instructors. I don't know what the other categories would be. I don't know what the data will provide, but that would be more meaningful. If
Right.
I'm going to make something up here now, but if,
Right.
all of our electrician instructors are white, that's interesting and maybe needs some addressing.
Right.
They obviously aren't, but
Right.
but we can't tell that with the high level number.
Right.
And I think it might be very interesting, for instance, in healthcare, which is a very diverse workforce. How diverse is our electricians?
I can't really tell if people are through or not, so I don't want to interrupt.
Director Wilson, if you'd like to say something, I think people were done.
Oh, okay. My question is there any way as we do this data that we can see the difference in salary from each group, including non-minority? Because I'd like to know based on salary, not who gets what, but based on the salaries, how they run percentage-wide. Can we do that? Oh gosh, can't nobody hear me and everybody's gone.
Right.
Yeah, so we
Hello,
may be,
can anybody?
Yeah, you're getting a response.
we may be able to
Okay.
manually get that information from HR staff members across WTCS, but right now the system goes through a company called Pay Factors, and they put their salary information there, and it gives us an average of what the pay is for a certain role versus what each institution is paying separately. We do have that information somewhere on most of our positions.
I'm sorry. I'm not being clear. I'm not talking about institutions. I'm talking about within MATC across the board salary ranges for each category.
We have that information.
Okay. I'd just like to see it.
Okay.
Not that it'll say anything, but then it might. I'd just like to see it.
I'm happy to provide that. Thank you.
Other questions on the data?
No, I do, just as an FYI, as I've been meeting with Dr. Mannion, that this is probably a report that really talks about if we have this consistently where the board can look this up rather than wait till we get a semi-annual report and go from slide to slide, it will allow us to more deeply understand it and look at patterns and trends. So that is our goal as we're trying to build this data dashboard, if you will, for board members. So we can have this and say, oh, this is what it was 6 months ago, and here's where it is now, and we can look at it side by side in either a spreadsheet or whatever, rather than in a PowerPoint presentation and trying to say, can you go back to that? What is that? And all of that, and have that more concisely. So that is our goal in all of the areas, not just in affirmative action, but in any of those areas that we're monitoring as a board. So this is one of those that came to highlight as we're going, can you go back 2 slides? And what is that? Where, we bring this up, and will we remember 6 months from now that this came from the district board's census rate? Will we ask that same question again, where if we can look at it and see that historical piece and just some footnotes, like remember this comes from here, it's reported here, here's what our goal is, this is linked to the president's goal and all of that, rather than having to, every time we come back and see this, like, oh yeah, now we're into it, and we start going like, why are we looking at this? Oh yeah, and what are our goals? And so creating that so it doesn't take us that long. So that is really our goal when we're looking at the board monitoring data, whether it's enrollment or affirmative action or salaries or whatever it is that are the key monitoring data, that we have a much more robust data dashboard, if you will. And it does mean down to the whatever, but the level of data that we need, and have trend data to say, oh, well, 5 years ago we were here. We're trending in a direction maybe that's not good. So that is the goal for some of this. And so it's good to hear the questions. And I think if we can frame it around having more robust data or more complete data rather than just a snapshot, it allows us to really say, so what with this data as we act as a board. So.
Okay. And then the last slide, we took a look at employee separations for the calendar year. And you can see this is for full-time employees. And we had 97, and when you can see the number of minority versus non-minority, and the middle column is the percentage of all full-time separations, and then the far right-hand column, employee percentage, that's the percentage of employees that are employed in that group. So you can see with non-minorities, the separation rate's about 5% higher than the current employment rate. And then with minorities, it's the flip. The separation rate's about 5% less than the current employee rate. And then we break it down by our 3 largest races. But actually, this captures all of the 36 minority employees. And you can see the percentages there in the middle column, and then the percent of employees currently employed in the far right-hand column.
So one more. We don't have to do this now, but I wouldn't mind knowing separations includes retirements.
It includes anything. It includes voluntary, involuntary, retirement.
No, that wasn't my question. But my supposition is that there are more white, more non-minority retirements, longer-term employees. So I would be curious to see how that breaks down in terms of people who resign versus retirements at some time future. This is not something I need now, but I think that's instructive for us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify, are you asking for that, like the fiscal year or calendar year data? Because that information is in the board report for the separations. They have like the reasons.
I do.
So are you referring to like the year-long data?
Well, it's just that when I look at that percentage,
Sure.
I'd like to know, like, of that 57%, 80% of them were retirements, 20% were resignations or some other kind or termination.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Jeff Holland will be sharing with us the advisory audit reports.
The Advisory Audit Committee meeting was held on February 16th, 2022. Brian Kubik, Manager of Internal Audit, and Dan Kasperzak, Director of Information Security, discussed some of the topics to the Safeguard Rule, which is part of the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999. The Safeguard Rule governs the secure handling of non-public personal information, including student information. There's 4 categories: a single individual responsible for information security program, more specific risk assessment requirements, multi-factor authentication, encryption of student information in transit and at rest. Mr. Kubik also shared information on the federal funds. Federal funds he discussed were the HERP allocations. He discussed the spending to date, but this was back in February. He mentioned the new time limit that the college is allowed to spend the remaining funds. This has been extended to June 30th, 2023. Mr. Kubik finally shared that the audit committee was on track to meeting its charter for requirements for fiscal year 2022. Those are the highlights of the advisory audit committee meeting. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to address.
Thanks, I think we're good. And Laura Ray will be sharing with us a report on the foundation.
Good evening, afternoon. It's great to be here with you. A couple of quick updates on the foundation. We met on Thursday, March 3rd, when the board met, and I have a couple of things to report from that, but also they are doing a series of what we're calling board engagement sessions to learn more about the college, meet students that have received scholarships. And the last board engagement was actually to understand the finances of the college, because a question often that they get is, why do we need a foundation? And the bottom line is there's certain things public resources cannot go to, including student scholarships. So members of the finance team and others really kind of gave an overview so that they gained a deeper understanding and really an understanding what the role you have and the role they have. So a couple of updates. As of March 18th, the donors have contributed a total of $2.2 million for this fiscal year. We are on pace to raising $3.3 million this year, which is the goal. And we also set a goal of increasing the number of donors that contribute to the foundation by 9% as an increase from last year, and we're on pace to hit that goal as well. I gave background on several high-level initiatives the foundation is focused on at that board meeting. In addition to continue to raise money to support the promise, we also have a couple of other things we're working on. One is the Freighter Memorial Hospital Scholarship Fund. Freighter is going to be given a gift of $6 million as a one-time gift to support a 20-year program to fund scholarships. And at the foundation meeting, we actually amended the investment and fund policy, anticipating some changes we have to have that gift. We also have started a DACA Plus scholarship that provides scholarships for individuals that are not citizens of the United States. We have a partnership with Milwaukee that we're actually been able to get funding from, that Dr. Martin has mentioned, the gap year. And we've been able to raise private funds to support that gap year program. We have a PepsiCo Foundation that just gave $500,000 over 2 years for 160 completion scholarships and actually staff to provide additional support for African-American Latino students in specific programs that align with their business to make, move, or sell things. So there's a number of programs that are available, from everything from IT to business and manufacturing.
And then last two things, we have a new single parent scholarship fund that was established to support single parents. And then we've talked about the Uniquely Abled Academy in the past. That is for CNC machining careers for those that are on the autism spectrum, and that is privately supported. So we have a number of different initiatives that are both programmatic, but the lion's share of what we do is scholarships to support students. So that is my report.
Questions? Thank you. We're moving on to board monitoring. And we have several items under here. So our first item is the pathway presentation on community and human services, which is part of the HLC accreditation. Our pathways, I'm going to call on Dr. Dakbar.
Hello again. I am happy to be joined by Rick Cole, elite faculty in the recruit school here. So we shared the slide deck with you via email. We'll be glad to address any questions. Maybe I can go over maybe a couple of highlights quickly, if that's okay, and then we'll take any questions. So some of the highlights in this particular pathway, the paralegal program was named as best paralegal program in the Midwest. And this is by the Wisconsin Law Journal. Also, we have one of our full-time faculty, Lori Cornblow. She was appointed as a judge, and this is a Court of Appeals District 2. In addition to this, we're expanding our esthetician program, and we're looking into a nail tech lab, which is really great news for the district. Funeral services, very impressive pass rates. We have 83% pass rate for science classes, 77% pass rate for arts classes. If you compare this with the national norms here and the averages, 57%. Now 57% national, 83% METC, really impressive. And the other one is 68% compared to 77% at METC. Police Academy doing great things, graduated 26 law enforcement professionals. And I think Rick can tell us more about this. And we're heavily involved in some kind of continuing education training in the district. We'll be glad to address any questions or any specific information you may be interested in.
Listening, seeing all the different places people are at. Director Foley.
As a litigator, I have a particular interest in knowing what the curriculum in the paralegal program is. If I wanted to see what is actually being taught in this course, where would I?
I'll be happy to follow up and just send you the curriculum. And if you'd like course description in addition to that, I'll be happy to do so as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Baker.
Sure, so this is just, you know, that there's a pathway with nail technicians and the police academy recruits is a little mind-boggling, but it makes sense. I mean, it works for everybody. It's not confusing for students.
Well, we look at this as community education, and we have funeral services if you want to add to that. So, you know, anything that's related to serving our community, we cluster that into one pathway, and that's why you see this range of programs. Is there a more logical way of doing this? We tried in the past, but I think this is such a nice way to really kind of get this group that is in the business of serving our communities. So both are, I think, would you agree, Rick?
Oh, the SERVE pathway stands for the fact that they're all community service organizations. If you look at the Criminal Justice Associate Degree Program, the Recruit Academy, Fire, EMS, and yes, it may seem like a different partnership with nail tech and funeral services and so forth. These are primarily all services in our community that nobody gets away without needing at some point. And I think we're all kind of honored to be in the SERVE path.
One of our biggest programs is human services as well. And that's another program with a very impressive high minority participation. Human services is a key program in this pathway.
Yes.
I'm going to bring up this question again. I know that we had a conversation about it like right before the world changed on us and we entered the pandemic. And so you were addressing it, but we were talking about synergies between or the opportunities that may exist with the police academy and then our police academy at the city of Milwaukee, and why we don't have more overlap in this, if there was a way of benefiting from that. I think there are some particular things that the city was looking for with diversifying its police force, being a little more nimble with police classes, and in a relationship here. Because I didn't know how many we were graduating per year here at MATC versus, the class sizes and the number that we were doing, at the academy, and if there were possible cost savings that, that could happen with actually sending recruits here. And there was some things that you looked into, but I didn't know how far we actually got into that. And so if you can kind of share with the board where we were with that.
Absolutely. So we're a key partner. We continue to work very closely with them. They have their own academies and they have their training programs. We are happy to complement any programs, expand beyond what they do, but we have to respect where they are. And in many cases, they just want to do their own. And we've approached them multiple times, and but we at MATC have many things to complement what they do, and they continue to come to us for that kind of training.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
So just so you can find me on the org chart, I go by Rick. Everybody knows me as Richard. And we're lucky enough that one of our, more on leave part-time instructors is Jeff Norman. And he and I went to law school together. So we've had some of these conversations. First of all, the 720-hour academy that we've run over the years between the 400-hour academy, the 520, and the 720 is set by the state. The city of Milwaukee has to do the 720-hour academy, but then they also add in more specific city of Milwaukee things. Mm-hmm. And because of that, that makes it a little bit harder. And the other part with the city of Milwaukee is they have to have capacity to do both in-service and their recruit classes, but their hiring officers ebbs and flows in time depending on the retirement. So that and they have their facility at Tetonia. So historically, the academy we've had has dealt more with suburbs, Franklin, Oak Creek, et cetera. And a good part of that is because there's the extra things that Milwaukee needs for its officers to deal with, like municipal court and other standard operating procedures. That's my understanding of how that's been. Currently, there's been the start of discussions in starting to work with the police aid program that had existed before. And I think prior to the pandemic, where you'd have students fresh out of high school that were starting in MATC, because in order to maintain your certification, you have to have at least 60 college credits. So the synergy we've had has actually had more to do with our associate degree program, making sure that we are an option for them to get those sorts of credits. And then we also have a transfer agreement that once somebody goes through the academy, there is some work experience that goes from the academy materials that correlates to the associate degree program. So we've had the opportunities, but it's specific on the particular dynamics. And just for clarification, I was lucky enough to run our academy until 2016. And then I was succeeded by a gentleman who was from the Milwaukee Academy. That's Eugene Reyes. He's just wrapping it up. We just hired another gentleman who's running the academy. And I'm lucky enough to be instructional chair with the associate degree programs. Right. And I still teach in the academy, so it's a blast.
Okay, all right. So there are conversations there. You actually are working together. You're seeing. Okay, all right.
I hope that answers your question.
Do you teach, when you say we do mostly work with the suburbs, do you in those courses teach Greenfield specific requirements or Shorewood specific requirements, whoever the?
To put it a specific way, each agency you've got a standard list of, let me start over again. So there's department policies that are required by statute. And then each department has their own policies that are on top of that. Milwaukee has many of the same policies, and all the agencies have or they're at least supposed to have policies that are determined by statute. So in our associate degree program, we're teaching the basics, practical experience, et cetera. We have a mix of former Milwaukee police officers as instructors and suburban instructors. I'm a bit of a mutt. I came from Kenosha Sheriff, and then I was an attorney. So I've been a prosecutor and a defense attorney. So we each come at it from a different angle. To answer your question further, the suburbs require less of the specific to their agency, because once they've completed the state determined curriculum for our academy, the 720, they're able to be certifiable. And then then the agency trains them in specific areas for like how you're going to process somebody in Shorewood, right? And then Milwaukee has more of those processes because you've got 5 districts that are like, I mean, in all fairness, District 1, District 2 is like a Greenfield and an Oak Creek all on its own.
Sure.
And I think I've answered your question, but maybe not.
You have, and I guess this is a request to Director Hamilton, of course, is our City of Milwaukee elected official representative. We've got a city budget that is a year away from facing a true crisis financially. At the same time, we have a city that wants to substantially increase the number of police officers on the street. And it just seems to me that if they're running their own academy for any purpose other than teaching Milwaukee specific policies, that the city is spending money on something that we already can do, or to maintain facilities that we already have, and that there should be some additional synergies. And I know there's always politics and ownership and that sort of stuff involved. But if one of our offerings was jurisdiction-specific policies and procedures, right, and you could sign up for whichever one you wanted, and one of those was Milwaukee or First District Milwaukee, whatever it had to be, we could actually use their personnel as part-time instructors on that, and then they wouldn't need to maintain the Titonia facility or separate classrooms at all. I mean, that's what I'm hearing here. So I guess I would just ask that you guys pursue this, continue to pursue it. I know you do, but perhaps Director Hamilton can get a conversation going at that level. Consolidating services is a common way to save taxpayer money. And this just seems like a no-brainer. We are an educational institution. They are not, except they choose to be. So I'm just hoping.
And we have a lot of officers that are in the academy specific job duties that could be on the street if there was another agency that was responsible for doing that work. And I see a lot of these synergies coming out of necessity, talking about some of the looming fiscal things that are coming down the pipe, that we will have to be more creative, and a lot of the ownership and authority and political kind of wrangling would be far more secondary to trying to continue to provide the service at a high level into the expectations of the community. But which is why I just continually bring it up, because I think it needs to be on the forefront of our conversations, especially with something like this. I think there are huge savings that could happen here with possible improved services in the community.
So I'd like to reconnect. I know we connected in the past and so on. So let's do this, reconnect sometime soon, and then we can explore it one more time. I mean, we did explore it in the past, exactly the synergies that you're talking about and so on. And we felt limited in certain areas. But, I'll be more than happy to pull a team together and look into this one more time.
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
Any other questions? Just want to make sure I'm listening, seeing, watching. Okay, thank you both for that update.
Thank you.
And we have Dr. Mannion up for our next two reports. The first one is the Achieving the Dream update.
Hello again. Okay, so hopefully everyone had a chance to watch the Achieving the Dream update video. It's very exciting. We sent it to you twice. We thought we were reporting out last month. And at that time, we had all the project leaders who were committed to being at the board meeting. And tonight, unfortunately, we do not have as many. But in that update, you heard about career coaching, and you heard about classroom engagement, and about coordinated care, the three larger projects that we're working on. And the two of our leaders from the coordinated care are here, Director Alston and Dean Burrows. So they would be happy to answer any questions you have about the coordinated care project. For the other projects or any other things to do with ATD, I'll be happy to take any questions you have after watching the video, or to bring questions to the experts. I thought the video was that good too. Okay, so.
I'm not sure you're seeing anything, so.
I'm the next item, so I thought I'd just wait.
Yep.
Till you called on
I
me
wanted to
again.
make sure, 'cause sometimes I get someone from those. So we're ready for your moonshot update.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. I should say that our ATD coaches are coming. That is an update since the video. They will be here on Monday and Tuesday to meet with those three teams that you heard about. And they're going to help them kind of figure out where we are, what's been done, what needs to be accomplished still, and then also looking at how we roll it over for next year, looking at the data. So there'll be more to come on that visit next month. All right, so Moonshot. In the second video, you heard about the three projects: hold reforms, retention grants, and transfer pathways. Again, the project leads were not able to be here, but two other things that have happened since those videos. One was 27 of us, I think, attended. I'm sorry, I just got confused. We are about to attend the EAB convening on Tuesday. And so we will be meeting with the two new Moonshot regions, one Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, and the other one is from Pennsylvania. So they are the new cohorts, and they will be learning from us, and Dr. Martin will be speaking at that convening. And so then we're also going to be kicking off 3 additional projects at that time. So you'll be hearing more about those 3 projects as well as we move to operationalize the hold reforms and retention grants and continue on with the transfer work. So any questions for those projects, I could try to answer, or I'd be happy to bring those back to the leads as well. Hey, thank you very much.
Is that meeting virtual, or is it the one coming up this week? I'm guessing the one with.
Yes, that's the virtual.
Yeah.
Yep, that one will be virtual. The coaches will be here live for the first time, so we're excited for that. Thanks.
Next, we have our Men of Color initiative, and I think Jeff Jans is going to introduce.
Yes, good evening, everybody. We're very pleased to have our Men of Color initiative on the agenda for tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to our Dean of Student Experience, Equan Burrows.
Absolutely, and if I can, please, welcome, hello, call our coordinator, student life, and manager, one of our 3 managers of the Men of Color program, Mr. Amanda Brooks, to the table as well. Again, Equan Burrows, I am your Dean of Student Experience, supervising a few areas: bookstore, childcare, food service, Veterans Resources, Student Resource Center, Counseling, Psychological Services, and athletics, all 9 of our sports. So I wanted to make sure that was out on the table so that everything thereafter in regard to the specialized programming that we're doing with the Men of Color function is understood that it's a collaborative effort. It is a true function of the college and of the support of everyone in the room, including all of you, Madam Chairperson, and President, and board members. I'm honored to sit before you today to talk about this program that has been here for a time. And it's been a labor of love to get it to where it is today. And I'm excited about all of the things that we've done throughout my time here, 3.5 years now. It seems like a blink, but at the end of the day, 3.5 years at the institution, and then 2.5 actually supervising the program fully We've gotten funding, we've gotten a number of things, again, because of you all and because of the leaders in the room. Dr. Gonzalez de Jesus, Dr. Jans has been an amazing support structures for this program. And again, I'm just excited. So please, I want to have somewhat of a conversation today, and then ultimately leave enough time from our 12 or so slides at the end for questions and answers. And so if we can get to our slides, please do not look at any of the pictures of eCoin. I didn't put them there, my staff did. At the end of the day, we're glad that we are here. And actually, is this the Google link or is this the actual downloaded slide, Beth?
This is a PDF of the downloaded slide.
Not a problem. Now, we made some updates to the Google link, but it's in your email if you want to look at that, but this one will work as well. Next slide. Of course, we all know that the Minutes Color program was launched back in 2015 under the leadership, of course, our very own Dr. Vicki Martin, where, again, we focused on a number of things, including those equity gaps that were founded here at the institution. Next slide. And the measures were dedicated to improving, of course, those short-term completion rates, overall retention rates, and then ultimately improving those graduation and closing those equity gaps. Next slide. What we're doing is attaching ourselves to the function that the nation sees as a fundamental need for the institution and for the thought of Black male achievement at large. Of course, we all know the Obama organizations, My Brother's Keeper Alliance, and then thereafter within the city, the Black and Latino male achievement functions within Milwaukee Public Schools, and ultimately the Milwaukee County Office of African American Affairs, in which this program in particular, at that time, under the leadership of Dr. Walter Lanier, has been an imperative support to the logic of what we're doing and how we're doing it here in regard to supporting our students of color at large. Please, next slide. And so just to jump into the function, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Brooks to go through this slide in particular, because again, we have, and on the other updated slide, there were pictures of, actually we added our actual managers of the program, which we have 3. Ms. Brooks stands as one, and 2 others, Mr. Kyle Hayden and Mr. Jose Salzano. And so, Ms. Brooks, if you want to go through just quickly this slide, and I'll jump back in there after you.
Of course. So we have our, within our programming, we have set it up where we meet weekly. We have our weekly check-ins. Of course, now great to be back in person with you guys as well. It's great to be with our students as well. So we have a weekly check-in on Mondays, virtual, as well as within our Student Resource Center. Bi-weekly, though, we have our Storm to Success events. And each week, or bi-weekly, different speakers have come in. As we can see on the screen here, we have some of actually our partners that we partner with, as far as sometimes those weekly sessions are going to conferences. Sometimes it's, national leaders within the industry of Black male achievement and minority male achievement coming in, as well as our local supporters. And then also working with our tutoring and library services, with tutoring sessions that are, set up for certain times. And then we also do a weekly newsletter. So we always know what's coming up for the next week. Socially, of course, we know that is a big part of connection. And so we do have our social events as well. And in April, our partnership with the Milwaukee Bucks, we will actually be all going to a Bucks game together.
Absolutely. I want to brag about our folks and our students in particular, but Ms. Brooks in particular, be it that she is one of the only females of color doing minority male work, a proud fellow of the Campaign for Black Male Achievement in particular, and her doctoral studies currently are solely focused on men of color in essence. And so again, wanting to again give you credence to the idea of the logic of what we have in place as a stretch at the moment until we find that permanent position to lead our special program allocations for the college. But truly, we have our individuals at the peak of their fields in regard to supporting our students in this regard. Mr. Kyle Hayden as well, finishing degrees in counseling and within the function, and of course, Mr. Salazano and in his specialty as well. And so all in all, want to brag on them, and I would want to continue to do so as we go along with the development of our program. But when it comes, no.
Oh, no, let's say, and it would be, if we didn't highlight some of our partners, of course, the main initiative out of North Carolina, of course, Clemson University, and then we just got back from Tampa with Black, Brown, and College Brown. So definitely our partnerships globally, I will say, of course, with the Campaign for Black Male Initiative, we have to definitely highlight those partnerships.
We can go to the next slide, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about some of the holistic pieces of the puzzle. That S dropped down there, didn't it? So what are we looking for our students to do? We're looking for them to participate in class, right? To consistently speak, communicate, and engage with their instructors. And then ultimately be on time. As we all know, as being in a seat once before, just showing up is half the battle. And as we know, attendance is key. And I'm so glad that the institution at large is making that effort in order to make sure that we're tracking that. And of course, those study hours, right? So we're asking those students to commit to just doing these simplified research-based things to increase success. And we know that the skeleton of this program is not new. We've been utilizing this structure. I've been utilizing this structure, this logic model, if you would, that includes social and emotional wellness for over 12 years now. And starting at Tallahassee Community College, in which the Achieving the Dream function, you may have heard of their success within the framework as well. Just to double back as well to the last slide, you see Black, Brown, and College Bound. That was a conference, again, as Ms. Brooks just said, we just got back from. It was in Tampa, Florida, where Emmett Smith was the actual opening keynote speaker. He did a great and amazing job. Our students totally related to the function. And then our closing speaker was Dr. Ibram Kendi. And so, of course, no stranger to this college as well, but gave a great closing speech to the students to encourage and to develop that activism spirit, if you would, to be able to make sure that the others come behind them, right? That transcending logic. And so, again, I thank all of you, all of our leaders for being able to support that. But the bigger picture here is working with our chief marketing director as well, and PBS in the early stages. We are now looking to actually start to spread the logic of that student voice, right? Making sure that we're recording what those students have experienced while on those trips and the trips that will come ahead of us, and being able to really chronicle and be able to share that voice to the entire student population. Because again, students need to see folks, the peers, in essence, that are doing and moving and experiencing, and ultimately that investment needs to be shared. And so we're looking to do that with our marketing structures as well. Next slide. We're going to get straight to it. Just to start, it is just a start, and we are currently assessing. Dr. Yan, our Vice President of Institutional Research, is currently assessing our fall cohort of students. But in essence, the logic shows here that ultimately our students are doing better. Our students, being the students that are part of the Men of Color program, are doing better than students that are not in the Men of Color program. There's more to glean from this particular document, but at the end of the day, that is the baseline that we want to see and that we want to grow. All right, and then ultimately we'll have more data. And again, I wish we had about a week or so left in regard to developing the next semester's worth of data. But again, I am optimistic to say that we have moved from 58 students to roughly over 100 students this semester, looking to continue to rise and develop. Now, we look at those numbers and we say, well, what does that look like in comparison to the greater whole at the Black, Brown, and College Bound Summit, where we took 5 students to the actual summit. We actually met up with a number of others. So again, as you can imagine, across the nation, there are Men of Color programs based upon all the initiatives that we talked about earlier. But again, everyone convened on Tampa, Florida. So there was over 800 students, right? Faculty and supporters of the idea, which came together and just so happened to see somebody that you guys may know, Dr. Johnny Craig, once our Vice President of Student Services. He had brought a group of young men from Seminole State College, in which he's currently the Vice President there. And then thereafter, I was able to meet with the program that I founded at Tallahassee Community College, the Black Male Achiever Program. And they brought 7 students. So imagine the picture that we have it. It's actually posted on the Black, Brown, and College Bound Conference site. We did, again, that was an updated slide at the end of the day. Imagine seeing all 3 of those programs from 11 years ago to today, being able to share and then therefore after collaborate. It's awesome. The work is just starting though. We have a lot more to go. Next slide. Communication is key. As we all know, if they don't hear about it, they won't be able to gain anything from it. And so with that, we make sure that our student life office in particular which utilizes a frame called Campus Labs, where all of our events, all of our engagement opportunities are listed. Student clubs, organizations, so on and so forth are listed there. The program is listed there as well. Next slide. And lastly, of course, if you guys know about Navigate, we know about Hustle, and those pieces of the puzzle are going to be great added benefits to the function of how we communicate with our students and how we keep and track our students through the Navigate function. And so glad to be a part of the HCCN, the Holistic Coordinated Care Network, through the EAB function to be able to make sure that this is a priority of ours, that we're tracking and assessing in real time our special populations. Saying special populations, we want to grow those populations as well off the springboard of the work done here within Men of Color at large. Please, next slide. Well, that could be the last slide. Good deal. So thank you again for allowing us to be here. If there are any questions, again, I'm glad to answer as much as I can.
I actually have a question.
Director Wilson,
Please, Director Wilson.
Yeah, I finally got in. This phone is really whacked up. Have you tried reaching out to other brothers in the state for an event to let them know around the state what you're doing? Are there any other ones like this in the state of Wisconsin?
Absolutely. We actually had our practitioners breakfast. It is an annual event that we have in the fall of every year. Practitioners that work within the field of men of color, as well as specifically Black male achievement. And so that is our fall event that we have every year. And then also on April 22nd, we will be having, I think this is the 22nd, 21st.
You got it.
Yes, sorry, 21st or 22nd of April, we will have our one-day summit where we have invited practitioners from the state, but most importantly, our Black and Latino male initiative partners with Milwaukee Public Schools, as well as our partnership with Milwaukee Fellows. So absolutely, that is one of, I would say, the key things in our minority male initiative here at the college. But definitely connecting statewide.
That's absolutely spectacular. So how are you spreading this news to try to get the media to cover something a little more positive?
Well, Tony and I are best friends, so don't let them tell you. At the end of the day, we are definitely talking and going to be talking more often. Tony, forgive me for embarrassing the function, but at the end of the day, I appreciate his leadership and all the things we've done with social media and with the functions of our website to make sure that what we have out there is truly up to date and best practice in that regard. And so the reality is we are doing as much as we can to highlight, and we will do more. There are dollars on the table to be able to do exactly what I spoke to in regard to highlighting, recording, capturing, chronicling, and then therefore after disseminating the greatness that comes from MATC when it comes to minority male and minority male achievement. So at the end of the day, we are primed for greatness. I've said that 5 times today, Dr. Jans. We are primed for greatness. And again, I believe COVID in particular, I think we would have been well ahead of the game in regard to the function of how many students we're engaging, so on and so forth. But the reality is, as we go to those conferences, Black, Brown, and College Bound, to be specific, and speaking with my colleagues in the administrative capacity, several deans of students, several other deans of departments that have found the hard work and started to spearhead these programs, they're not seeing the engagement that we're seeing, right? So this is a great level set to say that our numbers are, compared to Tallahassee in this regard, and some of the students even came to us after the fact. We have a cool picture of that in video where the students were really like, how do we get to where you guys are going, right? In essence, and you know, in regard to numbers, and they're seeing that folks, particularly through the pandemic, have gotten comfortable at home, right? And so we actually have to make it interesting, make it attractive to engage, to get back into tutoring centers or finding those online tutoring functions that we know the institution has and making sure it's readily available, giving those workshops and modularized engagement opportunities to those students in our storm success sessions, as we call it. And then therefore after, just having fun too, right? The idea is if you enjoy where you go to school, research says, if you enjoy where you learn more.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, that's a principle and the foundational element of our program, that we want to make sure that experiences are key and prevalent for those students. And so our budgets have been reserved for those experiential learning ideas, right, over the past 2 years through COVID. And so the logic is pure that we will continue to excel within this function, and we hope to have your support in doing so.
Oh, I tell you, I'm excited, and don't forget those young men that are younger than you that are
Amen.
back there. That once you get it together, you get with them.
Yes, ma'am. That's next level, right? Once we set the foundation, giving back, giving that hand up is everything for us. And our partnerships are great. We have an advisory board we didn't talk about, but at the end of the day, it stems deep into the community where folks are interested in being able to lend hand and advice to our function. Current, past faculty persons and staff persons that said, "Hey, this is." Don't forget about me. There's a couple folks who were upset that we were in Tampa at the Black, Brown, and College Bound Conference without them, right? And wanting to pay their way, but at the end of the day, our students had an amazing time, and I hope to be able to share that with the board sometime soon once we're done with that project.
Yeah. Quick question.
Sure.
Do you have a goal for participation levels? Because you talked about almost doubling the numbers in the past year or so.
Absolutely.
Is there a goal that you're trying to reach just to have a cultural impact on the campus?
Absolutely. Ms. Brooks, you want to ask the question first before I do? I know my number, but 10% is pretty standard, right? Of the capture of responses that we get from students at large. Of course, I was once the director of student life, here in Chicago and in Tallahassee, and the logic is reality is that, of those who you send an email to, you're going to get a certain percentage. Now, what we're seeing though is that through the new functions that we are implementing, Navigate, EAB Navigate, and of course our subsidiary idea for texting, which is also, we've been able to see increases in response rates. And so changing the avenue to the phone, in which we're all glued to, especially the generations that we're looking into, the answer is yes. But 10% of the 2,800 students that consider themselves to be minority males would be an amazing function. And we're almost, we're a little bit under half there, but the logic is still pure that we want to make sure that this is a voluntary function, right? We want to make sure that students see some benefit, particularly in that. And we know that comes from word of mouth. And so we know we have time. We need time in that regard. I'm asking for time in that regard to also show proof that this program is effective. And again, I know we're doing that. I know it's having an impact on the certain young men's lives that we engage with on a daily basis. And even after they leave, the other presentation gave pictures of some of the folks that are doing great things at other spaces right now. One Donovan Hemphill, which you guys have seen in several situations, but also a leader in the Men of Color program and in our student government and in our Black student union, so on and so forth. And the names continue on when it comes to business and industry, like Mr. Bryce, last name Killebrew, who has been doing and still doing great things within the structure of our communities, all spanning from our programs and programming at large when it comes to the student experience.
Yeah. Well, let me extend an invitation to come back to
Absolutely.
The Black Male Achievement Advisory Council at the city.
Absolutely.
We funded some of your activities in the past, and it's been great return on the investment.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very easy, through our efforts to try to have Director Wilson mentioned going back and getting some of those younger. We had a cradle to career, try to build partnerships to try to have an impact and have some measurements in each one of those areas. And chose MATC's Boys and Men of Color program to kind of focus in on that career portion of it, simply because the numbers are here.
Particularly.
So there's an easy way to have an impact to reach goals by partnering with your efforts, so that everybody's sharing in the effort to reach to reach your goals. So it'll be great to come back, seeing that there's new leadership and fresh blood and some new successes that you have to share, and in some ways that we could probably partner. So hopefully we can get that going.
I can't wait. I'm so glad to have your commitment to do so. And again, please, if anyone at this table and or online would like to reach out to this function, again, our Minicolor website and is being developed, Tony, and the function of our email is open. And so at the end of the day, we're excited. To your point, Director Hamilton, the MATC is the largest majority institution in the state of Wisconsin. There are more men and boys of color walking through our doors than any other space in the state of Wisconsin. Understanding that, embracing that, and then therefore engaging behind that logic is everything to us, my staff, and I believe this institution. And I'm so glad again to have you guys as our support structure for this program and for our departments at large.
Thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm.
Have to, absolutely. When you see in their eyes, you know, man, it's amazing.
Thank you. Jeff Howell, I think you have the next 3 items on the agenda, starting with OPEB and the FCC trust.
Yeah, that enthusiastic
I was
report.
gonna say.
It's yeah, when I get to talk about numbers, and sometimes the numbers are not as positive as we hope they could be. So the first, Beth, I don't know if you have the report should be in front of you, the report that I'm going to refer to, but if we can get it up on the screen as well. So the first page is the FCC Spectrum Trust. If you're looking at your sheet, the left-hand side this is a quarterly update, and I just want to remind you that this was December 31st of 2021. These numbers are from, and you can see on the left-hand side the asset allocation. We have $118 million invest. The value of the trust was $118 million as of December 31st. You can see the numbers, the allocation numerically, and then also graphically the asset allocation. And on the right-hand side, we see the performance summary. You can see the beige bar is the trust performance against the blended benchmarks for each of those, the 1 quarter, the 1 year, 3 years, and since inception. So you can see that the PFM, our financial managers, are doing a very good job. They're beating the benchmark. So you can see at the beginning of the quarter, on the bottom right-hand quadrant, the quarter ended 12/31. We started with roughly $4 million. We ended the year at $118 million. Since inception, we had the money that came in originally was $84.9 million. And like I said, the value at the end of December was 118. But now when we fast forward and we look at the numbers today, when the things have happened in the world and also in the market, the value as of yesterday's market close, was $110.9 million. So it's down about $7.1 million since December 31st. So just pause if anybody has any questions. It went down fast. My hope is that it can go up fast. We can go to the next slide and we'll talk about the OPEB trust. Same thing, on the left-hand side, you see the asset allocation. And also on the right side, the performance summary. Once again, the beige numbers are outperforming the blended benchmarks. Beginning of the quarter ended 12/31, we had 49 million. And at the end of December 31st, we had 51.7 million. As of yesterday's close, the value of the OPEB trust was $48.1 million. So it's down $3.6 million since December 31st. there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer the questions you may have.
I have one general
Sure.
question that's specific on our numbers and no surprises. I mean, I think
Mhm.
you would expect what you're showing us. The post office federally just eliminated their OPEB liability, which has taken them out of a sort of a default state
Right.
status, right? Do we see potential for that happening throughout other, because I was actually around when this became a thing.
Yes.
And we stopped paying our long-term debts on a year-by-year basis and started to having to account for them.
We continue to pay for, we still do not take any funds from the OPEB
I
trust.
know that, I understand,
Okay.
but we didn't used to have to even have this trust because liability was not demanded in the same way by financial institutions. That's now happened to the US Postal Service. So my question is, do you see that happening elsewhere in the public sector?
That they're eliminating their OPEB liability?
Yes.
Yep. Well, I think the government paid recently with, they funded a lot of the underfunded pensions. So I know that took place with President Biden. You know, he had some funding that went towards funding underfunded pensions. Yeah. So each year, one of the things that brought this liability was over like 200 million at one point. And what happened is several years ago, they put in a policy, an insurance policy. So once you hit 65, the insurance policy would pay. So that reduced the liability quite a bit. And there's no new entrance to this. So each year with our audit, and we get that information in October, we can share that information with you in October, November timeframe. They tell us what our the present value is of our liability. And it was, I believe, between 90 and 100 million dollars was the total liability, including this.
Okay, great.
So,
Thank you.
okay.
Any other questions on OPEB of the FCC trust? If not, we can move into the fiscal year 22 year-end budget performance projection.
Okay. And I believe that's at your table as well. Do you have that on the screen back or no? No. Okay. Okay. If you have it in front of you, the yellow column is the full year actual fiscal year 21. That's a full year that's been completed. You can see the total revenue that we had that particular year. We had the FTEs for that particular year were 8,022. And if we go down a little bit, you can see that we did balance the budget. We flipped the page. On the back side, you see the total expenditures, and we had a small surplus that year, 735,247. I have to attribute a lot of the savings. What we did is once we knew that our FTEs were lower than anticipated and budgeted, I have to attribute Dr. Martin sends a note out and asks people to stop spending if they can, and also there's a position, once again, a position prioritization process that helps us to not just refill positions, but make sure that the positions they truly need to be filled. So the next two columns, you can see the budget column. The top area this is all revenue. At the bottom of the page, we have 177,361,000 in revenue. But one of the things I want to kind of point your attention to is this budget was built on the expectation at the bottom of 8,800 FTEs. We also, just to balance the budget, we put in $4 million of HERF funding to help us balance the budget. And so as you can see, if you go to the next, to the bottom of the page, whenever we put a budget together, we do balance the budget. We find a way to balance the budget. And the far right-hand column is the forecast. The forecast is telling us, this is financial information that we had through the month of February, and then we're projecting out what we feel that, what we will see on the revenue side, what we'll see on the expense side. So our revenue obviously is a little bit lower compared to the budgeted 177. Even we've added additional HERF funds to get it up to, we've added up to $6 million of HERF funds on the federal revenue line. And we're still, the revenue is down compared to budget by 2.6 million. And we're in, here we had a projection of 7,800 FTEs, which is down 11% versus prior year. So the revenues is down considerably. You can see on the right-hand side also the forecast change versus the budget. You can see some of the categories: statutory program fees, that's tuition, and also material fees. That's both of those categories are lower because of the lower revenue associated with lower full-time equivalent students. So as we go to the next page, we flip it over. We're anticipating spending to be a little bit lower. Like I said, there's three, I always refer to three categories. We have wages, benefits, and discretionary spend. Our benefits were running a little bit high at the end of the year. We do have a health plan that's on a calendar year versus this is the first year it's been on a calendar year. Compared to prior years, it's been on a fiscal year ending June 30th. So there were a lot of claims in the months of November, December as people are anticipating going into the new benefit season. They've met their deductibles, so we had higher claims. So as a result of this, there's a projection of a roughly $2.7 million deficit, but we do have plans to be able to close that gap. The discretionary number that you see there, almost 9 million, or your 17.9 million is a projection that we did in January. We got the budget managers together. We asked them what they could save, and they reduced the budget or their expectations by 1.1 million, but I believe it's going to come in quite a bit lower, because you can see the previous year we were roughly 14.3 million. So I do believe, I know we will balance this current fiscal year, but it's going to take an effort. So I just pause for a second to see if anybody has any questions. When I say healthcare claims, I just want to remind everybody, we are self-insured, so it's not like we have an insurance policy where we have fixed expenses. It fluctuates based on claims, but we're in a healthcare consortium, and we kind of help spread that risk with other colleges who are part of the consortium.
How does being part of the consortium spread the risk if we are self-insured?
They're self-insured also. What we do is one of the biggest areas that we save while we do RFPs together with them as well, to try to, like right now, we're working on a medical, a prescription RFP, so that you have more participants, you can get savings. There's also being self-insured. So the prescription portion is
So the administrative costs that are being saved.
Yeah, administrative costs are being saved, and also stop loss. So if you think about it, we have stop loss, so we share that the stop loss risk with other schools, and also the stop loss insurance. That was the primary reason why MATC went into the consortium, was because alone our stop loss insurance was escalating each year. And even within the consortium, without doing an RFP this year, we're looking at a 25% increase in stop loss premiums. So we hope to bring that number down as well.
If I
Director
could-
Baker,
Yeah, so I'm gonna take my question from a little bit earlier, and maybe I can toss it to Janice Falkenberg for follow-up with our legislative people. Because what I'm referring to is, I had to look it up because I couldn't remember when, but I think it was back in 2004, maybe, when the GASB rules changed. It was either GASB 45 or 75 that made us have to account for our post-employment, not pension, but post-employment benefit.
Liabilities.
Liabilities.
Yes. Mhm.
And a piece of legislation federally that literally passed within the last 2 weeks eliminated that requirement for the US Postal Service. So again, so I think it's more of a legislative than a finance question, is to see whether there are moves to spread that throughout other parts of, which would be a massive relief on a lot of public sector budgets, city, county, all over the country. And I know there was quite a bit of buzz when the Postal Service did this, just like last week maybe or
Yeah.
something. So maybe Remy could do a little work for us on it. And I thought I'd take, since I had asked the question, I figured I'd take the opportunity to follow up on it.
Yeah, I understand the concept.
Yeah.
But required or not, it's fiscally responsible to have that fund there to meet those as they come, rather than just assuming that when the liabilities become real and actual and immediate, that we'll have the cash. And that was the reason for passing that, because the Pension Guarantee Board was finding itself with massive unfunded pension liabilities, or that's where it started, was with pension liabilities. This is not pension, but it's the same concept. So I just don't want us to jump to the conclusion that even if we didn't have to have this, that we would not have this.
Absolutely. I think it's a question of the years, how many years you have to plan out.
Yes,
and all
but
of
just
that.
for example, think about what would happen if we didn't have that fund and we had a year out there when we had a 15% drop in enrollment, which nobody expected, because, hey, who was expecting the moon flu to arrive, right? So it's there to even out the ups and downs, and we would have to think hard about whether to keep it, even if we didn't have to.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, because I think I've asked the question before, to what extent or what percentage does our OPEB balance actually represent? And I know you said it's a moving number because you always have to calculate who currently is in there, but it isn't anywhere near like even a percentage that it would do that. So if you take that away or free up those contributions, you still owe that money. Right now it's unfunded and not accounting for that in some way. You still owe whomever, like what that is. And so to not fiscally have that money there, I think is just that balance, because it's still not 100% funded in the money that's in that OPEB piece of it. So that's the part that, from a fiscal standpoint, like I think we would have, from responsibility, at least account for some of that, because we could hit some, and then we're going to be like, where's that money coming from? It's got to come out of your operating budget. Like that doesn't serve our students well then, because that would be taking out of it. So I think it does have some fiscal responsibility to it, regardless of so it's good to know if there are changes to that question.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be like, if there is a situation, just to manage that if there were changes, but I do think that having it came with some rational reasons. Yeah, just the restrictions. I don't know that we felt the restrictions yet, because it's a good thing, because we do have those liabilities to employees, and to not have that accounted for could put us into a sticky situation in the future.
The good news is that no new entrants are going into post-employment benefits, as you know. And then, and as people reach 65, then they fall into the other plan. So they fall off of this. And so, yeah, so there's light at the end of the tunnel. Okay.
Any questions on the budget planning assumptions that were provided to us so far? I know we've got the potential looking at the 22, 23.
So,
right?
Yep. So this is 22, 23. And basically it's showing you the three columns that we showed for the forecast for this fiscal year ending 2021, 6/30/2021, or 22, I'm sorry. And then what we're doing is we're providing information for the upcoming budget. And conservatively, we're looking at 8,100 FTEs for the upcoming fiscal year, which is I can see a reaction. It's a low number, but we need to be realistic. And I'm not saying that 8,100 is going to be the final number. I know that we've talked about, we've had a group that has gotten together and looked at all the different categories of potential students categories that could be coming in, and how they're trying to retain, they're trying to increase and re-enroll a lot of students who have kind of fallen away, and increase the amount of classes that they're taking. So there's going to be some initiatives. So hopefully that number, we might be able to move that number up or build a budget that's closer to that number. And when we build a number closer to that, if we start to get additional, typically what we'll find out in the fall is by October timeframe, we'll know if we're going to have, if we're seeing more enrollments in the fall semester. And October is the month that we do amend our budget if we need to. We do it every year. We true up on the previous year, and also we get the final numbers from the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Department of Revenue tells us what our true numbers are for the tax levy and other areas. So, but if you look at this, you can look at the far right column, the preliminary forecast for revenue. We don't have the. We also are looking to see if there's any HERF funds that will be available or freed up to help us with this, with the upcoming fiscal year. Right now, there's a team that's looking at, because there were commitments for the institutional funds. I believe there's about 12 million that's unspent at this time, but they're committed for other things. So we're looking to see what's available, and that might help us with the revenue as well. But we're also holding, as people retire, people leave the college, we're holding positions open, and that's, if you remember, roughly 90% of our costs associated with the general fund are people-related costs, so they're wages and benefits. So we're looking for opportunities to save. And I don't know, Dr. Martin, is there any thoughts that you might have or comments?
No, we're going to be working on those strategy structural changes that really need to happen to account for the lower enrollment. However, what we're also going to be doing is, if we can find strategies, or the climate changes and people start coming back to school, or we find strategies to go into the workplace more often, or into high schools more often, or having high school students come to us, then we will change our budget accordingly.
Yep. Any questions? This is just the revenue side. We're still working on the expense side. And at the end of April, we'll have a full picture of what the budget is going to look like. And then May and June, we'll approve the budgets.
Any other questions related to that? So planning right now as we get closer to.
Yep.
That we will see more. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I know Janice will be giving us a brief update on the health and safety update and COVID risk mitigation.
So Dr. Beal was not able to be with us tonight, but I do come with good news. Obviously, our COVID positive cases on campus have decreased dramatically. We have gone to a mask-friendly campus currently as of March 14th. We are still having masks being worn in our childcare centers, our shuttles, our vaccine clinics, and our COVID testing sites. And we are continuing to hold those vaccine clinics and those testing sites. And we're going to continue to have those through the end of the semester, and we'll continue to monitor. We are going to be suspending our on-campus required testing for our employees who are not vaccinated as of March 31st, but we are requiring that all new hires be vaccinated. So again, we are going to obviously we're holding more things in person. We're coming together. We're going to continue to monitor our on-campus positive cases. We still have our contact investigation process in place. We will continue to monitor how we pull back again on some of those mitigation strategies as we go through the remainder of the semester. So I'm glad to answer any questions if there are any, but that is all good news. So, and we're hoping that that will continue.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Next is new business. Is there any new business?
Well, I've got a question just because it's been hanging with me since the opening comments. We did have Kevin Mulvey come and mention the compensation study again. And we had a communication by Dr. Martin just about the direction that she was going in with the outreach. And so I'm wondering where we are, and I'm still keeping in mind our in-service, you know, our, you know, our role.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's an important role that we play in the policy.
Yeah.
And I'm a little less interested in the, not less interested, I'm very interested. But don't feel like I'm responsible, right, for, you know, the day-to-day, you know, what are we doing in order to ensure that the process is what it should be. And so what role do we play in ensuring that the way that we voted before and our expectations there, that it's going in that direction and that, you know, we're meeting these goals? Because I think part of our responsibility is ensuring that the environment with employees in general, not specific grievances, is being adhered to, right? And so, like, what's the process for revisiting that?
I think it's a good question. I think, as was alluded to in the opening comments, there have been, since the written communication came out, there's been even a meeting very recent today. And so I think that that will continue to evolve with that communication. But I think it's probably realistic to be able to ask for updates on that to get holistically, because I know that there are probably, you know, questions related to that holistically. So I don't think it's unrealistic to say, like, provide some status updates on that and then determine what that means in terms of revisiting. So I think that part of it is just opening up communication lines again that I think have, and getting that back on track, and then deciding where we are on that. Because as I think was alluded to in the communications, conditions overall have changed from when, you know, when that was made, as I think every employer is looking at conditions previously when an action is, and now we're coming out of here, we've got a very different workforce. I think during the enrollment report, we're all looking at when the economy is in a certain place, what that does to post-secondary education as a whole. Like, there's just a lot of factors that now you have to come back and revisit. So I think it's a valid question. And I think there's a couple communications that are happening very shortly after this. And so I think not waiting until the end of April, I think sending out some communication between there about some things that are happening, and not just operational, but like, so the board can understand that, and what does that mean based on a decision that was there, and where are we based on that. So I think that makes sense to precipitate that conversation, but to provide feedback as to what happened. Because I think it was alluded to even in the opening comments, like even since that was out, there are some new happenings and some new updates. So maybe if we keep updated on what that is, and decide if that needs to be, how we're updated on that, or if it's something so big that it needs to be revisited.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just kind of get a sense of the board as if that's an interest.
Yeah. And I do think, I think that, like, it's that balancing, as we talked about at our retreat. So like wanting to know enough, but letting the process go to a point. And then, so when is it like, okay, we've gotten to a point and now it like something, there needs to be something that, so part of it is just keeping us informed on that movement and that's happening, which is very important and really critical. And we've got some communications. The next part is like, okay, now we're at this new place, and what do we need to do with that? So I think timely question, and I think definitely something that we will keep in the forefront between now, even in the next board meeting on that, and see what that looks like as far as what needs to be done.
Okay.
Question.
Yep.
Since we doing what we need to do between now and the next board meeting, with my prayer that it'll be over by the next board meeting, I think we need to have some discussion about what kind of position we want to, if any, to take on our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. And I heard somebody say we were doing some things, but I think we need to figure out what we as a board can do.
You have a suggestion, or?
Not yet, because I thought I understood Mr. Mulveen to say that they had something. I haven't seen anything, and I haven't heard anybody say anything. I guess I would like to look and see what others are doing and ask Director Hamilton, are they doing anything at the city?
I mean, yeah, we actually are. We have a sister city with a city that's just north of Kyiv. And so there's a number of organizations in the city that are putting together care packages and those types of things. So we're gathering up that information, sharing it publicly, and there's an effort at the city to contribute to it. So there's that effort at the city, but there's been, communication with, our sister city partners over there about the types of things that they need that would be helpful. But outside of that, that's about the extent of our reach.
Mm-hmm. Director Wilson, are you asking for opportunities or to become aware of opportunities that are happening within the college that the board could engage in? Or I guess I'm trying to understand.
I guess I'm asking for a position that we support Ukraine. I know there are different entities that are taking a position more so than gathering up stuff.
And we officially took a position today. We had a council meeting this morning, opposing Russia's steps. I mean, we took that symbolic position in a resolution.
And that's what I'm talking about too, but I'd like to see what they got wrote down from earlier in the meeting.
Okay, we can reach out to Local 212 to see, to make sure that they shared with what it is that he mentioned that they were doing, if you're interested in hearing or seeing that again. But right now, we don't have a resolution in front of the board, and I don't know, as far as a new business, since that wasn't noticed as such, we would not be able to take a position on the floor, if you will, like that, because it hasn't been noticed. So we would not be able to do that as a board.
I declare, I thought I said for April, if it wasn't over. I do apologize. I wasn't asking for anything tonight. I was asking for some information and discussion so it could be noticed in April if it's not still going on. But my prayer is it'll be over. I thought that's what I said. I apologize.
I guess I was just trying to clear what the question was. I heard that piece of it. So I think heard. Anybody else for new business? Not, I think we've mentioned the future events coming up, but next week is a district board appointment, and it does say that it's in person. Janice said, I did hear you say that it's hybrid though, for people who wanted to observe or attend, because it is open to the public. April 26th is our next board meeting here in person again at 4 o'clock. And then that same week, very busy week, Thursday night is the dinner from the WTCDBA, right? And then
Can you say it with the rhythm?
No, I can't. I really don't. And then on Friday is the in-service piece of that. And as Director Foley have talked about, on Saturday is also some enlightening, engaging meetings that continue on with that. If we are done with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to move into closed session.
I move that the district board convene into closed session pursuant to section 19.851G of the Wisconsin statutes to discuss item 11A, MPBS Master Control Service Partnership Agreement. The board member convene into open session to take action on matters discussed in closed session under item 11.8 if necessary.
Have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Mendieta Ramos and second by Director Baker to move into closed session. We will need a roll call vote.
Director Foley,
Aye.
Director Hamilton,
Aye.
Director Mendieta Ramos,
Aye.
Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Baker,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
and Director Olson.
Aye. Can we take a 2-minute break here? Because I've been sitting for. Thank you.